Okay, hello. We are live. Brian, nice to see you. Hello, everyone
So
in the
nice to
chat
see
room.
you, Elon. You look relaxed, rejuvenated, and thank God alive from
Here I
some
am.
death-defying travels that you've been on.
Yeah, I just got back this morning. I've had 2 naps today, so I'm hoping that should be enough to get me through this
What?
episode.
How do you have two naps?
So I had an
Like my kid has three naps, and that seems excessive. Like we're gonna transition her to two naps.
I had an overnight flight and we landed at 6:30 and I didn't really sleep on it. So then when we got back, then I slept from like we got home around 8. So then like say 8 till 12. Then like we sort of went out for the day. We had a friend over and then afterwards I had a nap just now between like 5 and 6:30 or something.
So
And
you've had like 5 waking hours today.
yeah, but I've used it to prep this show. So
Wow,
hopefully
such dedication.
hopefully it'll be good. I'll need you.
Um, Cool. Do you know, I was actually curious. So you were in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Is any of this show like worth it to discuss on the show or probably not? Do people want to hear our
I doubt it.
Okay, go ahead.
So I looked up how many hockey players, like period, not like anyone who's ever had an elite prospect profile. So like you don't have to make the NHL to make you just play some level of meaningful hockey.
Hmm.
Have originated from Costa Rica. None.
Well, that
Zero.
doesn't surprise me. I do, it didn't seem to be a really hot topic there. The NHL playoffs were not on the TVs at the different bars, believe it or not.
I can't believe it. I mean, what are they watching?
There was Dodgers baseball. There was like baseball,
Yeah.
basketball. Base-
Who's the most famous Costa Rican athlete?
I mean, you'll have to tell me. I don't know.
Looks like sprinting and hurdling,
Sure.
race walking. I always felt if there's one Olympic sport that I could just like sneak into, race walking.
No, come on, it's hard.
Yeah, but like you could fake it.
You'll
Like
come last by so much. I feel like the joke I've heard from comedians is like luge is the one where like you could sort of just like trip and next thing you know you're in the event.
I don't know, race walking. Like it's like you don't need any equipment or any serious like skills training. You just need to like we all walk. I can walk.
Yeah, well, I could run too. Doesn't mean I could do like the sprint like as fast as the Olympic athletes.
No, but I think probably for at least 3 meters, I could at least like keep up the appearance. Like I could be like if the Jamaicans in Cool Runnings could bobsled and fit in, I think I could fit my way into a race walk.
They did train. John Candy really worked on them for a long time to get them into shape. It didn't happen
But I'm not
overnight.
saying it was easy for them.
All right, Michael. Yes, of course. It was a Seinfeld who Seinfeld makes that joke about the accidental luge should be an Olympic sport. You're gonna see a stand-up. Cool. I saw it recently, like last year, or it was actually a little bit disappointing. But you'll have fun. You'll have fun.
Never meet your
I didn't meet
heroes.
him, but I'm
Oh.
going to see Weird Al in a
The
few
people who
months.
met you in New York learned that lesson.
I had a great hang with John Reed yesterday.
Patron John,
He's so
hot
cool.
takeoff host John.
He's and so much more. But okay, let's let's start the show. Hope you guys enjoyed our pre-show banter.
That's as far as Elon and I's genuine friendship goes. Like that's the most personal chat we'll have probably for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll do the same thing
Yeah,
in
and
2 weeks.
and I didn't even ask him about his daughter. Okay,
It's been 10 days, Elon.
how's she doing?
Fine.
Okay, all right. Good to know. I assume it's the kind of thing you'll.
She's napped very well today.
That's nice. I know that's like the big thing when you have a baby is how their nap schedule's going. I'm ready. Are you ready?
It's a really boring thing,
What is?
nap
Yeah, I know.
schedules.
That's why we haven't been talking about it.
It's crazy how like easily I can get sucked into talking. Like I'm not going to. But
Well,
like and I know the whole time I'm talking that it's so boring. But like I was asked a question and to give a thorough answer, like I need to, you need to or to give an answer, I need to be thorough. There's a lot
I
of
guess.
elements with.
Usually when people ask you like, how's your daughter doing, you don't need to be thorough because no one actually cares.
No, but that's not it. Then it's like, oh yeah, how's she sleeping?
Oh.
And then that's not a simple answer.
Yeah. Well, I didn't
Yeah.
ask that.
Yeah.
But clearly you want to talk about it.
No, I have no interest in talking about it.
PJ, where are you going to see Weird Al? We've got a patron cast also in a few days, so we'll just do this all over again. So Brian, we'll actually be chatting soon.
I've seen Weird Al twice in concert.
Cool. I actually have two, but it was like 20 years ago. I think I saw him in high school and once as a kid.
We were probably at the same Weird Al concert in Ottawa. I think was it a Lansdowne?
Could have been.
Yeah.
All right.
I was in grade 9.
Want to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
If it wasn't 20 years ago. I was in grade 9 20 years ago. Oh. Wasn't that? Oh, maybe I was. Oh my God.
Matthew and Brian, you guys should host a baby talk podcast, and I'm sure a lot of us will listen.
Matthew wants to talk. People with babies want to talk babies. People with dogs also want to talk babies, but it just gives them permission to talk about their dogs. Oh
Trust
yeah, you're
me,
a person with a dog. People with new dogs. There's a lot of parallels.
Okay.
I think babies are easier and cheaper
God.
than dogs.
It's the worst take you've ever said.
I think it's true.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, do you agree?
No, I don't think a baby is cheaper than a dog.
I do. Have you seen what dog food costs?
I not only have seen it, I've spent money on it.
Well, do you know how cheap baby food is?
I don't know.
It's free.
It's free, I guess. Yeah, but Josie's off work. Aren't you losing so much money because of not having an income? Is that part of your cost?
It's priceless. The time and buns.
Oh, well,
together.
I guess in that case, yeah, having a dog is more expensive than having a baby because having a baby is priceless. And a dog has a price. How dare you? Having a dog is also priceless.
If you take mat leave for your dog,
they won't give it to you.
Do that. There's probably one country in the world.
I'll bet you if my dog was like, if we got like a puppy,
I bet like a super cool tech company has that in their contract.
I'm sure it's like if you get a puppy, they'll give you maybe a week to try to get it house trained. I don't think you're getting like months and months.
If they want to be competitive in the ultra competitive tech job market,
if anything,
free idea for all the tech companies out there.
I think actually what a cool company would do is just have a zone in the office where you could bring your new dog and there's like a professional dog trainer there that will get your dog house trained for you while you work.
If anyone's enjoying this, yeah, we have a patron cast.
Yeah, so why don't we start the show?
And we're out of material for it. I have a question to ask you. Maybe you can just remember it. I just want to know, like, is Weird Al touring on a new album?
Not that I've heard.
He's just touring.
But I don't know. I mean, I haven't dug into it too much. I'll really dig into Weird Al like a week before the concert, maybe to get boned up on what's the latest material to be ready for.
Get boned up.
It's a saying.
It sure is.
I mean, you bone up on something, don't you? So can't you get boned up?
Can you explain that, like the etymology, like the origin of that?
Bones. Like fossils. So, and then I don't know. I have to think about it. I'm sure I could come up with something. I'm tired also, Brian. I told you this.
You had 2 naps. You shouldn't be tired.
I forgot to buy Red Bull. I have a stupid Coke Zero. So it's not going to help.
That's sad.
Okay, let's do this.
It's heartbreaking.
Can we start?
I'm ready.
Okay. Yes! Welcome everybody to our second spring series episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys who own Eric Karlsson in their keeper pools. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky. Really excited to be back at you with another episode after a 2-week hiatus, and with me, of course, to go through everything that's gone on and a lot more, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. I am, these 2-week breaks between episodes. I miss you guys. Elon, I miss you the most. No offense to anybody listening, but I'm so pumped, rejuvenated, rested, ready to go with I think we've got some really good takes coming up on this show, including follow-ups on takes that may or may not have been good when they were originally made, when we created our almanac. We're about to start parsing we're honest. We're honest people. We want to see how we did. We projected things. We don't just want to sweep it all under the rug. We're going to talk about it, what we got right, what we got wrong, how we can do better. That's all coming up through the spring and summer series.
Yeah, okay, we've got a lot to. That was a lot there, Brian. But yeah, the plan for today is we're going to first talk a bit about what's gone on in the NHL playoffs over the last couple of weeks. What we like to do on Keeping Karlsson is not only give our takes on the playoffs, but see like what we can glean from what's happening in terms of fantasy for next year and moving forward. So we'll try to pick little fruits from what we've seen and see if any of that will give us advice on what we should be doing for next year. Then, like Brian said, so last summer, just as a recap, we recorded the world's first ever NHL audio almanac where we went through every single team and came up with our own projections for every single player that we thought would be fantasy relevant. I think the top scoring player that we didn't list in the almanac was Dylan Strome. So that was our big miss, I guess, of the almanac. But almost every fantasy relevant player aside from him was discussed. And yes, I think the plan for starting today and throughout the summer series for the next few episodes, we're just going to be going through some of our projections, seeing what we got right, what we got wrong, what we learned, what we think will change for next year. You know, we're going to try to really break it down. And then maybe by the end of it all, we'll record a new almanac and the cycle will begin anew. Brian, of course, before we get into everything, let's mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com. They're with you. It doesn't matter if it's the spring series, the regular season, the summer series. They're coming at you with new articles every single day. I'm at the site right now, 21 fantasy hockey rambles. So, you know, even in the summer series, they're giving you everything they have, like new articles all the time. Like I said, plus I use the tools all the time to prep the show at Frozen Tools. We've got an article here about Nikita Gusev. We definitely have to talk about him at some point in their prospects report. A lot going on. DobberHockey.com. It's fantastic. I'm really proud that we're being presented by them. But okay, I'd like to get started by talking about the Carolina Hurricanes, who have now swept the New York Islanders. Brian, how crazy is it? The Islanders sweep the Penguins, and then Carolina sweeps the Islanders. So what does that mean about how Carolina would have compared to the Penguins in a playoff series?
I don't know. That's a really funny question to ask, right? If A is better than B and B is better than C, then isn't A better than C? Or it could be like rock, paper, scissors, right? Where each team could beat the other, but is beaten by. I would love to give you I would love to see it happen. I'd love to see a Carolina Pittsburgh playoff series. I can tell you, like we when we broke down the Pittsburgh Islanders series from the first round, we talked about how it was goaltending. Like it was a pretty close series, and goaltending was the difference. The Islanders got it, the Penguins didn't, and it was actually the same story for Carolina, New York Islanders. The Hurricanes and Islanders offenses clicked at similar rates. They both looked roughly equal in terms of being dangerous. And each side's goaltenders were a different story. And Elon, what is story in Carolina with Mrazek going down and then McElhinney coming in? What did you think of that?
Yeah, so it's really funny. Yeah, and like you say, sort of how both teams had different abilities to score. Not so much in the first game, right? A 1-0 overtime game. I think that was the first one we'd seen of that in the playoffs. But yeah, the goaltending situation in Carolina is so interesting. Brian, do you remember this debate that we had when the Carolina Hurricanes signed Peter Mrazek? Or no, he was traded from the Leafs. Somehow he got there, and I messaged you.
You mean McElhinney?
Yeah, what did I say? Mrazek? All right, let me just start this over again.
Okay.
Brian, do you remember this conversation that we had a couple weeks, I don't remember, into the season when Curtis McElhinney got traded to the Carolina Hurricanes from the Leafs? Or was he traded or was he waived?
Claimed off waivers.
Yeah, okay, whatever it was, he got there. I messaged you saying, oh, maybe McElhinney will be decent on Carolina. He doesn't have as much competition. You flamed me. You were so mad at me. You were like,
we had like a friendship crisis over it because I was really rude to you about it. Like I was like, I'm not gonna think about Curtis McElhinney until this is nothing new is going to happen with Curtis McElhinney. And we're always trying to figure out the Carolina goalies. Like I was so frustrated and I didn't want to do it. And then I was rude to you and I hurt your feelings and you told me. And yeah. And then I apologized. It was a stressful time for us.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, your apology means nothing to me. What means something to me is the fact that I was right, I guess. But of course it was the 2018-19 season of goaltending. So everything was up. What's up was down. You know the saying. But anyways, yeah. So let's look at what happened here. So McElhinney has taken over from Mrazek. He won 3 straight games. So he came in relief in game 2 and he stopped 71 of 75 shots overall for a .947 save percentage in 3 straight wins. Curtis McElhinney is going to the conference finals. Maybe, right? Because actually Peter Mrazek is supposed to be healthy. He was practicing with the team. It's possible that he'll be available to play in game 1. So it'll be an interesting decision for the coaching staff in Carolina to decide which goalie to go with. Mrazek's had a kind of interesting playoff. So if you recall, Carolina surprised the Washington Capitals in the first round in 7 games. The 3 games that Carolina lost, Mrazek was pretty bad. He was below 900 save percentage all 3 of those games that they lost. But in the 4 games that Carolina won, Mrazek was amazing. So I guess he was, good. As long as you're good for 4 out of 7 games, then that's all you need to go all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, right? So now Mrazek, he was also great in game 1. Like I said, it was a 1-0 overtime win. So he got a shutout, stopping 31 shots. And then he was injured in game 2. He let in a goal on 10 shots. And I told you what McElhinney did. Mrazek could be ready to go for the next round. If you were the coach, who would you play?
If I were the coach, I would go back to Peter Mrazek, although I think it's really more a matter. We need to look at how well Carolina is protecting their goalies, and they're doing a really good job of it. The Hurricanes have the lowest 5-on-5 expected goals against per 60 minutes of all remaining teams. The only teams lower than them were Vegas, Winnipeg, and Tampa, who all got knocked out in the first round. So you're wondering, well, why did Carolina survive if all these teams are playing such good defense at 5-on-5? Well, Vegas, Winnipeg, and Tampa had 3 of the 4 worst penalty kills in the playoffs. So that's the reason why they didn't survive while Carolina hung on through the first round. So that's helping their goalies, that Carolina is giving them a lot of protection. But Curtis McElhinney is also really helping himself. Like, we need to give him credit, as I've been reluctant to do the whole season. Right from that very first moment, he was grabbed by the Canes because this is Curtis McElhinney. We know who he is. He's been around forever. We've seen him have these brief hot runs and then just turn back into your average / slightly below average NHL backup. But so far, his performance in the playoffs is amazing. He is outperforming his expected save percentage to an extent that no other goalie is even close to doing in the playoffs so far this year. Of course, it doesn't mean so much in a 2.5 game sample, but at least McElhinney is up to the task, coming in cold and shutting the door then, and then continuing to do so in the next couple games after that. And it's just, like, it's rich, Elon, isn't it? That this Carolina team, which has been kneecapped by their goalies for years and years and years, you look at Cam Ward and the other options they tried, Anton Hudobin, Justin Peters, Eddie Lack, and most recently Scott Darling. And now they're getting brick wall performances in crucial games from none other than Petr Mrazek and Curtis McElhinney, who don't seem distinguishable from the rest of the goalies in the list that I just rhymed off of goalies who have been the Achilles heel of Carolina all these years. But team defense is also an aspect here, but also tip your hats to Mrazek and McElhinney. And again, the series with the Islanders, which was not as one-sided as a sweep made it look. It's just that Robin Lehner in the other crease, he turned into a pumpkin after game 1. He was an .877 goalie in games 2 through 4. And it's hard for any team to succeed when their goalie starts playing at that level. The Islanders were relying on Robin Lehner essentially to be a .930 goalie all season long. .877 is a pretty far swing away from being a .930 goalie, so that's a little much. But honestly, even if Robin Lehner was just a league average goalie, the Islanders would not have been where they were during the regular season. I'm not sure that an average Robin Lehner still would have been enough to beat the Carolina Hurricanes. And then you look at what the Canes had in net on the opposite side. .978 team save percentage at 5-on-5, .957 in all situations. Essentially, Carolina Islandered the Islanders in the second round, and that's how they got. That's how they're getting to the conference finals.
That was so interesting. Such an great spiel with so many interesting facts and figures, but I don't think you answered my question, or maybe you did and you didn't say why. So you think that they should still go back to Mrazek for the next round, even though McElhinney's on such an amazing hot streak?
I part of me wonders if it even matters. It didn't seem to matter much in the regular season, although Mrazek eventually did win the job, and that's the only reason I'd go back to him. Yeah. I think it's great for them that they swept the series, so they might have a couple extra rest days to see where Mrazek can get. Only if Mrazek is 100%. If he's 80 or 90% and limited in his movement at all, I would absolutely go McElhinney. It seems like they can win with either guy in net, which is just a wild thing to say. So to me, it's not even a huge question. Like, I don't care who Carolina goalie is in round 3. I just care about what the Carolina offense does to score and what the defense does to protect them.
Yeah, that's like it's wild. It's gonna be really fun. Of course, we have to wait and see who they're gonna play between Boston and Columbus. It's 3-2 for Boston right now. They're playing again tomorrow. The crazy thing, also, just sticking with the Carolina net. Forgive me, everybody. It's just that's such an interesting topic, and it gets more interesting because both of these goalies are unrestricted free agents next year, like in the offseason. Like Carolina could have two whole new goalies next year. So Mrazek, he had a 914 save percentage overall on the season. McElhinney 912. So they were both solid also in the regular season. Not like amazing, but definitely better, like you said, Brian, than all the other goalies they've been trying for the last few years. I feel like we're going to have to discuss at some point. Both of these guys are going to get signed, maybe by the Hurricanes, maybe by another team. And then we're going to have to discuss how we think they'll do somewhere else. It'll be really fun to discuss McElhinney because, Brian, I, of course, knew he was going to be good because he was my hero from the 2017-18 Cupful playoffs where he got me a crucial win while he was on the Leafs to help lead me to a championship. So that's why I knew he would be good. But obviously you didn't have the same experience with him. So that's why you...
Well, the funniest part is that the Leafs, who are out of the playoffs saying, oh, Curtis McElhinney's still playing. We should have kept him. It's like... doesn't matter if McElhinney, like Leafs fans, you can relax. It doesn't matter if McElhinney stayed in Toronto. He wasn't playing a playoff game, right? It wasn't going to matter, although maybe he would have played a little more often to rest Freddie Anderson, and maybe that would have made a difference. And maybe McElhinney wouldn't have been this good in Toronto either. Who knows?
Who knows?
Don't worry about it.
I mean, probably now going into next year, the Leafs could always try to reverse their decision and they could sign McElhinney to be their backup again. I think that'll make a lot of people happy. And I don't really want to get into too much Leafs talk this episode. They've been covered to death ever since they got beat in Game 7 by the Bruins. We could probably have a long, fun discussion about Jake Gardiner versus Morgan Riley, who's the better defenseman. And, lots of fun debates there on our Facebook group. So you can go to our Facebook group and tag Ian in a comment and you could discuss all of the Leafs defensive issues there. Brian, okay, let's go on to another team right now. Actually, let's talk about the Islanders since they're the team that just got bumped here. And speaking of UFAs this summer, sure, the Hurricanes have to... Oh, actually, no. Sorry, one sec. I forgot. I still have more players to talk about on Carolina.
You start your program.
Restart my program?
No, did you start your timer?
Yeah, I've been doing it.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, what was I saying? You said your whole thing, and then I said... Oh, yeah.
You talked about the Facebook group.
Yeah, you can message Ian in the Facebook group. Sticking with the Hurricanes, I feel like we did this once in the regular season, Brian. We had a whole episode where we started like the first 30 minutes just of Canes talk because there was so much going on. But the crazy thing with them, not only have they been getting this goaltending, their leading scorer in the playoffs right now is not Sebastian Aho. And nothing against Aho. He's been great. He has 9 points in 11 games. But their leading scorer right now after 2 rounds is Jacob Slavin. Oh, no, it's Slavin.
Slavin.
Their lead is not Sebastian Aho. Their leading scorer after 2 rounds right now is Jacob Slavin. He has 11 assists in 11 games. This guy has been so great. And he had that stretch in the regular season where he went on this amazing run. And you actually said, he probably won't keep it up. And for the most part, you were right. But now, once again, just tearing it up in the playoffs. Anyone who grabbed Jacob Slavin in the last round of their playoff pool is loving life right now. Dougie Hamilton was a decent pick, 7 points in 11 games. Nothing to sneeze at. Justin Falk actually has been pretty solid, 6 points in 11 games. But neither of them are even near producing what Jacob Slavin is doing.
No. So way to go, Jacob Slavin, who is averaging 26 and a half minutes a night. And some of that is because he played 38 minutes one game. Overtimes are increasing average times on ice. But also Slavin is really playing a lot, and he's playing more than he was in the regular season. Regular season, he still had a big role. He was up to about 22, 23 minutes a night at his peak during the regular season, but he's still taking on more in the postseason. Slavin's also getting a couple minutes of power play time, which has yielded him a couple points. Looking at the comparison between, is he doing anything different in the postseason than he was in the regular season? His race stats are up a bit. And from watching him, I'll be honest, I didn't watch... I can probably count the number of Carolina games on one hand during the regular season that I watched. But watching him now, I feel we're seeing a little more creativity from him, some swagger than we've seen in the past. So, I could get with Slavin maybe raising his stock from a 30-point player, which is what he's been, to maybe a 35-point guy. But the bad news for him is there's no imminent openings on that Carolina blue line for him to sort of sneak into. You've got Hamilton, Falk, everybody on that blue line is still under contract through to at least the end of 2019-2020. But Slavin, 25 years old, is currently the Hurricanes' longest contract commitment at defense or forward. So they like the guy. I imagine they'll want his role to keep growing, especially the way he's performing in these playoffs. And I think best case scenario is Slavin gets sort of like a Jacob Trouba like edit as his career continues.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. That's actually a fun comparison. I think Truba's better in fantasy because he gets more hits and blocks, but Slavin, yeah, could be a guy that you might want to look at now late in fantasy drafts. It seems like he's really being relied on by this Carolina team.
Slavin's doing pretty good for blocks too. Like even as a 30-point defenseman, he was worth streaming in categories leagues where blocks were counted. So those are still coming. Those are still a part of his game. So yeah, if he can sneak into 35-point territory, then in deeper leagues, he could become draftable.
Yeah, I mean, who would you draft between Falk and Slavin in a league for next year? I feel like it's pretty close. Like Falk had an okay season. He held on to the top power play surprisingly. We thought it would be Dougie Hamilton's job. I feel like I'd rather have Slavin. He seems like a more reliable guy. He gets more minutes.
Yeah, and me, I'd go for ceiling. I'd go for Justin Falk and all the shots he puts on net and the potential because he is still on the top power play.
Yeah. True. We'll see if he holds on to that next season. Yeah, this Carolina team. You look at their scorers. Warren Fogle, 9 points in 11 games. The rookie, Jordan Stahl. I love to see him get points, Brian. I was thinking of drafting him in the second round of our Cupful winners playoff pool. Then I went with Joe Thornton instead. I guess that probably will work out okay for me, depending on what San Jose does with these extra games. But Jordan Stahl's really stepped up. The lines have changed around. Aho was playing with Teravainen and Svechnikov in the last game. Then it was Nino Niederreiter with Jordan Stahl and Justin Williams. So all 6 of those guys could end up being fantasy relevant and great next year, and maybe Warren Fogle as well. So we'll discuss it more in the Almanac moving forward. Let's move on now. Okay, let's talk about the New York Islanders. So we mentioned that Carolina has these UFAs that they're going to have to deal with their goaltending. We talked last episode about how the Islanders also are going to have a big UFA decision because Robin Lehner is going to be an unrestricted free agent, but that's not the only player. Like the Islanders go into this offseason with Jordan Eberle, Anders Lee, and Brock Nelson, along with Robin Lehner. They're all going to be unrestricted free agents in July. So the Islanders have a big summer ahead, huge decisions that need to be made. And I'd really like to zero in this episode on Anders Lee and Brock Nelson as they head into free agency. Lee had an okay season, right? Like definitely not bad. 28 goals, 51 points in 82 games, but it was a pretty big drop from his 40 goals and 62 points in 2017-18 when he was playing with John Tavares on that top line and top power play. Lee had an okay playoffs, 1 goal and 3 assists in 8 games. Like, who is the real Anders Lee? Is he like a 40-goal scorer that just had a down year? Is he a 30-goal scorer? I'm very interested to see if he's going to sign with the Islanders. And if he signs somewhere else, is he going to be like a top line, top deployment type guy? Or has he just been getting this deployment because there hasn't been other left wingers like available to play in that spot on New York Islanders?
You know, I think it's a mix. I think Anders Lee got the opportunity to be who he is because there weren't a whole lot of other options. But I think he's proven that even if there were, Anders Lee belongs in a top line role. You're asking who he is. And Elon, I thought we would know by now. I really did. Lee, if we rewind a bit, and because going into this year, we were hoping to get that closure to know who he is. And going into this year, Lee had an above average shooting percentage for 2 years after it had been low for the 2 years before that. So if Anders Lee had an above average shooting percentage this year again, that would have been 3 years in a row after 2 years of low. And it would have been a trend. I would have been like, yeah, okay, he's an above average shooter in the NHL. He's been doing this for 3 years, takes plenty of shots, good body of work to prove it. But of course, he did not make it that easy on us.
You had bad internet issue glitchies there. Can you go back to the start of like maybe 2 sentences ago?
I don't know what I was saying 2 sentences
Just
ago.
play wherever. Read your point. Like whatever point you're on, go back 1 point.
Okay.
Let chat room. You heard it, right? By the way, thanks for. I think this is a compliment saying my hair is like Steve Bernier. I hope that's a compliment. I don't know. I'll Google that while Brian's talking. But you heard Brian's internet glitch, right?
Anyway. You've always loved Steve Bernier's hair.
Who's Steve? I know Jonathan Bernier. Steve Bernier. I'm trying to remember now.
San Jose.
Oh man, was he on New Jersey also?
Yeah, later. But you really liked his hair when he was in San Jose at the start of his career. We thought he was going to break out. He was picked in that format where we did. There were 6 of us, and we each had a player from each team.
Oh, his hair looks pretty boring.
It was pretty cool in 2003.
I guess so. I just remember Steve Bernier. The reason his name really jumps out to me is I believe he was on that New Jersey team that beat the Sens and knocked them out of the second round of the playoffs, out of the conference finals. Anyway, this is boring. I don't know. I have a memory of this.
That's true.
Maybe I'm wrong. What do I know?
I
This is
don't think
not
he was
going any
ever a Jeff Friesen teammate in San Jose or New Jersey.
Okay, now I have to look up what a Chris Osgood is. Uh, all right. So, but anyway,
Okay,
right.
I'll
Yeah,
just
you can
go
just go back.
back. I'll guess and you'll work your magic.
Hopefully, you just go back to at some point reasonably in the past, so that I'll have something to work with.
Okay. Okay. We were hoping we would get some closure this year on who Anders Lee is. He had an above average shooting percentage for 2 years coming into this one. And before that, he had a low shooting percentage for 2 years. So we were hoping that a third year of an above average high shooting percentage in a row would have helped us see a definite trend where we could say, yeah, Anders Lee is an effective converter. He takes a lot of shots, has a good body of work. He makes it happen. But of course, he didn't make it that easy on us. Anders Lee dropped down 5% in his shooting percentage to go back to being an 11% shooter at 5-on-5 rather than a 16-17% type guy. He also dropped 5% on the power play. So like essentially he was 18% all situations in 2017-18, 13% shooter in all situations in 18-19. So that means that we're still in this purgatory where we're trying to see a trend in Anders Lee's ups and downs. Now he's had 2 lows, then 2 highs, and another low. And it's just like, okay, well, let's just see one more season what happens, and then we'll know who he is. I just feel confident enough to know that he's a pretty good hockey player. This year his IPP was a touch low, so that could explain some of the points that went missing. Everything else, though, pretty similar. And the biggest feather in Anders Lee's cap, I think, is that he seemed unaffected by the departure of John Tavares. He took as many shots as often, about as dangerously. He just didn't score on them as often as he did the season prior. So I have faith in Anders Lee still being a 60-plus point player who can put in enough goals to be one of the higher-end fantasy goal-scoring options. But it will be interesting to see where he lands next year. To me, he feels very much like an Islander, and I could see them committing to him, but we'll have to wait and see. If he does stay on the top line in Long Island, I expect him to be able to land somewhere between his 18-19 point total and his 17-18 point total, which for anybody who hasn't been able to keep track, it was a 51 point player this most recent season, 62 the season before. I see him closer to 60 than I do 50.
Okay, so that's not so bad. And if he goes to another team, we'll have to see. I could see him pulling like a Nyquist, after he got traded at the deadline. He was on the top line in Detroit and killing it. Then he went to the Sharks where he wasn't the, top deployed guy and his point totals really took a hit. Yeah, I don't know. I'll be very interested to see if Anders Lee goes somewhere else. But of course, the Islanders need to sign some of these players. Another option, Brock Nelson. So he had a career year this year. He had not such a great playoffs in the end, 4 goals in 8 games, no assists, but he did have a career high 53 points in 82 games. So basically, he had a similar season to Anders Lee overall, at least in terms of overall points. But for him, it was a jump up, while Anders Lee was a jump down. Would you consider Brock Nelson someone that you would think of drafting next season if he stays with the Islanders or if he moves? Like, is he a guy on your radar at all, or do you think he just had like a lucky season and at the end of the day he's going to go back to being the Brock Nelson that he was for so many seasons before this one? Like, the big thing this season is he had this huge opportunity, right? With John Tavares gone, Nelson went into the top 6. He became a line 2 center and he got to play with better line mates. So I guess if he stays with the Islanders, that would be a plus, and thinking he could do something similar again. But yeah, it was kind of surprising. I don't even think we projected him in our almanac. I think he's the next guy after Dylan Strome that is the highest score that we didn't even come up with a projection for.
I'm gonna verify that before we go forward. I have the doc.
Okay.
I really enjoy when the Steve Mason game makes an appearance. Nelson. Okay, yeah.
Don't worry. I got this in my head. I remember the whole thing.
Wow. You're so smart. Yeah, you're right. Brock Nelson did not get projection in our almanac because, well, he was coming off a 35-point season in 2017-18, and that was a career low, sure. But before that, he was like a half-point per game guy. Nothing more, nothing less. We weren't seeing a whole lot out of him that made us think things would change. But then in 18-19, Nelson's season was great. He kind of went the other direction as Lee went from a 60-point guy to a 50-point guy. Nelson went from a 35-point guy to a 50-point guy. Set a career-high 53 points in his age 27 season after, really not giving us much reason to expect more than 45 points from Brock Nelson in a year, if even that. And why Brock Nelson was able to crack 50 points was because he benefited from a big deployment boost under new coach Barry Trotz, who made him, get this, Elon, the New York Islanders' #1 most used forward. You heard that right. You can win bets at bars with this tidbit. Who played more minutes than anybody else for the Islanders every night in, night out as a forward? It was Brock Nelson, not Anders Lee, not Matt Barzal, although the person you bet on this at the bar will be really mad when they look it up because Barzal played just 3 fewer seconds a night than Brock Nelson. But Brock Nelson still played the most. He played almost 18 minutes on average per night, which was 3 more minutes than Nelson had played in a very disappointing 2017-18 season, and a couple more minutes than Nelson had played the year before that. And Brock Nelson, essentially, with this increase in deployment, is a great example of what happens when you give a player who has some decent underlying numbers more time on ice, a bigger role. They produce. They just keep doing what they're doing with more minutes to do it. And that's what happened to Brock Nelson. That's why he had a good season. His power play role increased too, though he didn't do much with it. He had just 8 power play points, despite getting a 50% share of his team's power play time on ice. Nelson played most often on the power play too, with Lee, Eberle, Barzal when he was on the top unit. So that's a spot where Nelson, if he can hang on to those minutes, he still could potentially improve next year. He also, when he was on the ice for the power play, Brock Nelson shot just 5%. So you could probably expect that some friendly regression with this role continuing could bump him up to 55, maybe even past it next year. So I'm expecting more of the same next season, unless Barry Trotz has a weird revelation in the summer that Brock Nelson is not his favorite player to play anymore. The ceiling to Brock Nelson's production, of course, before anybody gets really excited about Brock Nelson next year, is that he is never on the ice with Matt Barzal. They played just 13 minutes at 5-on-5 together over the 82-game season. So you can never hope for them to be on the ice together at even strength. However, you can hope that they're on the ice together on the power play. And that's a reason to hope that Brock Nelson can stay in the 50 to 55 point range again in 1920.
Yeah, assuming he stays on the Islanders, of course. That's the big question. If he goes to another team, we'll have to reassess completely. But he did get on the top power play. I don't think he started the season on the top power play, but he bumped Josh Bailey, and that was what triggered me to ask you for permission to drop Josh Bailey, which you didn't give me, but I did anyway, and then I was happy with it. So that is that. Also, I don't know what's more shocking, the fact that Brock Nelson had more ice time than Matt Barzal, or the fact that you were still calling him Matt Barzal at the start of your spiel, even though we've been corrected so many times.
I fixed it by the end now.
I like that. I don't know if that's better or worse. Like, I'd actually like to know. Tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Once we mispronounce a name, should we just change the mispronunciation? Like, should we change the pronunciation as we're talking about it without even referencing the fact that we got it wrong and just confuse the people who have no idea now how the name is said? Or do you want us to stick with it? I know it's fascinating stuff. We could probably do a whole episode about name pronunciations over the summer. But how about we move on, Brian, and talk about the San Jose Sharks, because they are still going. They're up now 3-2 against the Colorado. Sorry, I'm all discombobulated here with all the fun pronunciation talk. So the thing is, last episode, Brian, I think I was talking about how I think the Vegas Golden Knights are probably going to win the cup. And that was when they were, I think, up 3-1 or 3-2 when we recorded our last episode. The Sharks came back to win. There was that huge controversy in that Game 7, which actually John Reed, one of our patrons and a guy I just met over yesterday in LA. It was really fun. Thanks for the fun time, John Reed. He has a rant that he's going to say on the Patreon cast about that whole thing with the Sharks and that penalty and the fact that they were able to score those 4 power play goals and move forward. Anyway, the Sharks now are in this round against Colorado, and they are really good. And I want to talk about 2 players on this team which are having amazing playoffs and after having amazing seasons, and just see what you think about these guys moving forward. And of course, these 2 players are Logan Couture and Tomas Hertl. Okay, so Logan Couture, 13 points in 12 playoff games so far. Hertl right behind him with 12 points. Couture, they're playing on separate lines aside from on the power play. So Couture's been playing with Timo Meier and Gustav Nyquist. Hertl's been playing with Donskoy and Evander Kane. Okay. Couture had a career high 70 points this season, which was surprising to me. Like when I saw he had 70 points, I was looking back over the rest of his career. I assumed he had done better than that. He's had better paces, but he's had different injuries. So this was actually his first time joining the 70-point club. Even like saying it now, and I know I just researched this, I'm still like surprised. I feel like I want to go back, or you could correct me to make sure. But yeah, to me, it seems like Logan Couture should have a higher ceiling than just 70 points. Like, especially seeing what he's doing in this playoffs. Maybe next season he could have a real breakout, get to like point per game. And you know what? The same could maybe be said for Tomas Hertl, because he also had a career high 74 points. He led the Sharks in points this season for forwards, and he had a 79-point pace overall. So this guy's really broken out as a huge superstar. Do you think both of these guys could do even better next season? Should we be expecting maybe point per game moving forward? And like even more basically, like who would you draft first in a draft, like Hertl or Couture? Because they both had similar points this season. They're doing similar things in the playoffs. They both seem like really big superstars that are, Couture's been around for a really long time, but it seems like he's really breaking out this playoffs. I feel like I said that in other playoffs before, but he's really having an amazing time right now.
Well, we talked about it in the Almanac, how Logan Couture, when everyone's saying, like, I wonder when he's going to break out, I think this could be the season. He's 29 years old, right? Like, he broke out in his sophomore season. He had 56 points in 79 games. He followed that up with 4 more fantastic seasons. And then his age 26 season, he fell off. He had 36 points in 52 games. Next year, he was like a 55-point player. And 2 seasons ago in 17-18, he worked his way back up to a 60-point player. And in the Almanac, I'm not going to lie, I mean, it's there for everyone to listen to if you want to go back. I was really bearish on Logan Couture. I was just like, he's getting another year older. I don't know if he's going to have another breakout. It seems like he peaked and he's sort of, fallen to a comfortable 60-point area where he's going to stick. And like, I don't see any imminent deployment increase happening, and that didn't happen this year. So that's what I thought would have to happen. He'd need to get another minute or 2 of ice time per night. He didn't. He played exactly the same number of minutes he did in 2018-19 as he did in 17-18. The difference for Logan Couture in 18-19, though, was that he played with 2 guys who had career years, huge years. Timo Meier and Tomas Hertl were always with him. And when one of them wasn't, well, he was essentially attached to the hip with to Timo Meier. And when they weren't with Hertl, they were with Joe Pavelski. For a brief period, they were with Lucas Radil, and that wasn't really a factor. In any case, Logan Couture had a fantastic season. I think he probably overperformed. I think this playoff performance is epic and historic and will absolutely cement his place in the Hall of San Jose Shark greats for the amount of great moments that he had already given the team leading up to this, but this sort of like rebirth renaissance that he's going through, and like this like sort of leadership role he's taken on. Especially, no one will ever forget his role in that Vegas game. That was just an incredible thing to watch, and he was the guy, right? But I don't know that I'm signing up for a 70-point Logan Couture again next season. Like, I could see it. The Sharks are going to need it from him, but I'm just not 100% sure that what we're seeing is entirely sustainable through the regular season. And the number one indicator I'll give for that is his on-ice shooting percentage was a career high 12% at 5-on-5. And that is because of the shooting success that Timo Meier and Tomas Hertl had this season that we're not quite sure they can both repeat.
Sorry, can you say that last thing again?
Which we're not quite sure they'll both be able to repeat next season.
Okay, so you're not going to go into a thing about Hertl?
Oh, I'll talk about Hertl.
Yeah, because I asked about both, so you could just keep going.
Okay. And I'll speak specifically to Tomas Hertl. I think we've touched on Meier through the season. Like, we loved him in the preseason. Then he exceeded our wildest expectations with some really great shooting. Tomas Hertl is not someone we were so excited about coming into the year. He was one of the guys we actually underestimated the most in our almanac, thinking like we've seen the most that Tomas Hertl is going to get in San Jose. He never seems to be able to stick in top deployment. Something's missing there. And then finally, this year, boom, he did get the consistently high-end deployment that we'd long been waiting for him to get. And if you thought that like Tomas Hertl had like a sort of under-the-radar regular season, and that meant you'd get him at a great place in your fantasy drafts in September, he, like Logan Couture, they're not getting any cheaper as these playoffs roll on. Hurdle's now up to 8 goals and 4 assists for 12 points and 47 shots over 12 playoff games as of the moment of this recording. 4 of Hurdle's 8 goals are on the power play, and he's only going to play a bigger role next year in his age 26 season as the Sharks lineup changes with age and attrition for their players. But I will give you a caveat about Tomas Hertl's year next year, and a reason to maybe knock him down a few spots on your pre-ranking draft list. This season, Tomas Hertl scored on 1 of every 5 shots he took, which was about twice as often as his career body of work, which has generally been in like the 10 to 12% conversion rate compared to a 20% conversion rate this year. Like, to put that in absolute numbers, Tomas Hertl took 1 more shot in 18-19 than he did in 17-18, but he scored 13 more goals. So yeah, that's what happens when you're a 20% shooter. Hertl doubled his shooting percentage both 5-on-5 and on the power play, which is how he finished with career high and team bridesmaid 35 goals on the season. So can Tomas Hertl repeat that? You're already sort of hearing the answer. I don't think that he's going to get 35 goals next year. His expected goals numbers would agree with me. Like, he wasn't appearing to be any bigger a threat this season than he was in past seasons. He was actually less of a threat than certain other seasons, actually. So I'd expect Tomas Hertl to fall back to around 25 goals in 19-20, and I feel like that may even be a conservative estimate of where he'll drop. The reason I'm sort of saying just to 25 is that Hertl does have this expanded power play 1 role working in his favor. And again, he's going to be asked to step up big for San Jose moving forward as other pieces either go further into decline or leave the team. I do think that you are going to be pushed in your draft to consider Tomas Hertl a 30-plus goal player, and that other people in your league might think he's a lock for that. I think that's going to be a mistake that you're going to want to let other people make. I would really suggest that 25 is the most number of goals, the highest number of goals you can expect from Tomas Hertl next year.
Wow. Right. So it's kind of like a William Karlsson-esque projection, because you're saying that you don't think he's going to be able to keep up that shooting percentage and he's going to fall. But I didn't catch that, though. What is Hertl's first name again?
Tomas?
Every single time you said it, you said Tomas Hertl. Like, at some point, I thought you just switched to say Hertl, but you went the full Tomas Hertl every single time just to make sure everyone knew which Hertl you were talking about. So I think it's interesting. Like, it sounds like for both players, you're saying you don't think they're going to repeat what they did, both Couture and Hertl, and they're definitely both going to have their stocks way up in drafts next season. So there you go. Some, I don't know, controversial Brian Calm advice for everyone. He's saying avoid those top Sharks, let other people take them. He doesn't think they're going to be able to keep it up. And of course, we'll discuss them more later on in the summer series. But right now, they're having amazing playoff runs. You're saying don't let the playoff run fool you. You're looking at the regular season numbers and seeing some room for regression. Very interesting. I wasn't expecting that. We could go talk about the Dallas-St. Louis series quickly. I saw for a game, Vince Dunn was back on the top power play. I was like, ugh, because I'm thinking forward for next season, I thought that Alex Pietrangelo had really nailed that spot down, but it looks like that was just a one-off anyway. So maybe it's not even worth discussing. Back today, it was Pietrangelo on the top power play for the 4-1 win, and he even scored a goal. So yeah, I think that was probably something that I didn't have to worry about. So I'm glad that we got to see a correction there.
Yeah, it's really great that Craig Berube did that all for us really quickly. Just to be perfectly and absolutely clear, Vince Dunn was not the top power play guy once Berube took over behind the bench. You can see Dunn's power play share of minutes drop sharply right around Berube's hiring in late November. And then Pietrangelo's rise sharply at about the same time. So Dunn going to the top power play was just a one-off. As far as Craig Berube's coaching strategy record is concerned, like you said, Ilan Pietrangelo already back on the top power play for today's Game 6, and I expect him to be there in Game 7 and through most of the 82 games next season.
Cool. So you're saying people can draft Pietrangelo with confidence. This year, a lot of people who drafted Pietrangelo had a really tough time early on. He had those triplets. He was bumped from the top power play. It was frustrating. I traded him in the cupful for Seth Jones. It was Jake Allen and Pietrangelo for Seth Jones. I felt like a genius. By the end, actually, Pietrangelo was doing just as well as Seth Jones. So it turned out to be pretty much a wash. But yeah, okay. So you're saying don't worry about that because as long as Craig Berube is coach, of course, Craig Berube is going to continue to be the coach. I believe he was nominated for the Jack Adams Trophy. So generally teams don't fire coaches after that, especially when they're on continued cup runs. Brian, who's your pick for Game 7, St. Louis versus Dallas?
I think I'm going to go. I don't know. I'm actually totally undecided. I was
Yeah.
hoping I could decide by the end of that sentence. It seems like a toss up. It's been a great series. I think it'll come down to whether, it's going to come down to goaltending. I think it's pretty simple.
Yeah. Did you see
Bishop has had a
today?
couple weak moments, and so has Binnington. So we'll see which one can put together the most complete game for game 7. I'll be watching.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a coin flip. I don't think anyone should be able to say with certainty. Or if they say that they're certain, then don't believe them because they're lying, just hoping that they'll, get it right by chance and then be able to brag about it afterwards. Did you see Bishop got injured today? He took this like on I think it was the third goal of the game. It was like a high shot. It looked like it hit his collarbone. And then he left the game a little bit after. But then I saw a Roto World update after the fact saying that he should be fine. So we'll see. I'd assume Bishop is going to play in game 7, but it could be Hudobin. And, Dallas is one of those lucky teams like Carolina where they have a backup that's totally capable from what we've seen of like filling the role. And, the team shouldn't be too hurt by it. Over on Dallas, by the way, so Tyler Seguin, he did score Dallas's only goal today. It was a power play goal. He has 11 points in 12 playoff games. Brian, we've been doing our patron rankings on the Facebook group, thanks to the great Dave Betton, who's here in the chat room. Hey, Dave, thank you so much for setting that up. And we have a lot of fun every day voting on who we think should be ranked next in the patron rankings. We're like into double digits. Still no Tyler Seguin. Are we dumb for not having ranked him yet? I feel like in most seasons he would be ranked by now. I guess he had a bit of a down year, but he's so reliable for your shots on goal. And I feel like Dallas has more depth, like especially now with Zuccarello in the picture. Maybe like Seguin won't have to carry like so much of the load, like being on like the one good line, or sometimes they move Ben to the other line. Like, yeah, I'm just curious to know what you think. And also, I guess since I'm asking you about Dallas, I might as well just throw it all to you. Rupe Hintz and Dickinson, they're both getting great deployment. Are either of them sleepers for you next season? Right now, Hintz is looking like someone that might stick playing with two of Ben, Radulov, Seguin, or Zuccarello, and he seems to be really fitting in well there.
Well, let's remember that Zuccarello is a free agent, so we don't know where he's going to end up next season. If he does stay, like, we're not going to speculate too much, but I think whenever Dallas can find a guy that can play with one or two of Ben, Seguin, Radulov, and like that player helps them portion out their top talent into two lines, I think they like that, and Rupe Hintz is giving them that opportunity. So I could see him continuing to get chances to be someone in their top 6, playing with at least one and maybe two top end offensive players, which is why absolutely should be somewhere on your draft list next year. Also, some of the raw talent we've seen from him, like some of his highlight reel plays have been really impressive. We've been watching him now like for a couple months, right? He had some big moments down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs where he made an impression on people. Now he's making an impression on everybody who's still tuned in to the real life NHL playoffs. So I do like Rupe Hintz's potential next season, both as a talented player and as someone who could end up with some very strong line mates.
Yeah, and as far as Seguin goes, actually, I sold him short. Like, he's actually fallen really far. Like, we just ranked Mitch Marner at number 17, and Seguin's still not taken. So according to our patrons, it's like Seguin is someone you could get late in a draft in the second round. I would like, give me that all day. I hope I could get first overall in a draft next year. If I could take like Connor McDavid first, then give me Seguin on the turn at the end of the second round, along with a defenseman, I'm gonna be very happy.
I spent big bucks on Tyler Seguin early on in the tier 1 auction draft, like when the market was still being set, and it ended up probably being a couple bucks too much, but I had no regrets. I had some regrets over the first like month or so when he was doing nothing. But you look at his numbers from this season and he held to being just an offensive force. He's a fantastic hockey player. Yeah, he had some really rough variance that was working against him to start the season, but that's all it was. And like, I'm so mad in a way. Do you remember, Elon, how the owner, was it the owner? I know his name. I don't even want to say his name. The guy who said they're playing like horse poop or something.
Oh yeah, Brian will never say the word.
That guy's probably taking credit right now. He's probably patting, I spoke up at the right time. I said the right thing, galvanized the team, motivated. And like, if I'm Tyler Seguin, like part of me, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a stubborn jerk. Like I would sort of want to tank and be like, screw you. Like you didn't do this. I did this.
Screw you, dude. You're going to pull a ream? Okay. I don't know. You didn't laugh at my great impression. It's not nice.
I'm laughing now. You can splice in my laughter from another point in the show.
Yeah, I'll grab your laughter from somewhere else and make you something really smart. Okay. Yeah, that's really funny. So, Brian, you're not going to give any credence to the fact that calling the players, okay, get ready, cover your children's ears, calling the players horse shit was, you don't think that galvanized them and made them better?
No,
I
come on.
don't know.
That's nonsense.
Nonsense. Words have some meaning on
I
people.
just like you know, and this is something that has been talked about a lot in cities like Edmonton, where like the Oilers lose their ninth in a row, and like a beat writer writes about how Connor McDavid's leadership is wanting, or like he just wasn't good enough, and it's just like, why are you beating up on the best? Like you've got to take some time and look at the depth players and see what's going wrong. Like, are they good enough? Who else isn't doing their job? Like, you can't pile on your best players when your team isn't a success, especially when you haven't surrounded them with the tools to succeed. Sagan and Ben recently got Radulov. They sort of had Spezza while he was still good. Aside from that, they've had like no support given to them.
I know. I was just joking around. I agree with you that it was a silly thing to say.
Ugh.
Ugh, come on. And also, I feel like these are professional athletes. Like, if a player of Tyler Sagan's character, or I should say, like, not even character, like a player of his, like, stature, like, what's even the word here? Like, an amazing athlete like Tyler Sagan shouldn't need some, like, old dude calling him a bad name to motivate him. Like, I feel like he probably has the internal motivation to turn it on, and I'm sure it had nothing to do with that. Like, okay, anyway, I wanted to talk quickly about the Boston Bruins and their series with Columbus. Brian, first of all, you said on the last episode that, like, I said I thought Columbus could be a contender, and you said I don't see it happening. And then you pointed to how they had, what was it, like, overachieving on expected, or they had more goals than their expected goals. That was it, right? And I guess right now, maybe, I mean, we shouldn't say you could take credit, because there were a lot of series in the first round that where one team was up 3-2 and the other team ended up winning. Right now, Boston's up 3-2 after that overtime win, but Columbus is coming out really, really strong. And I wanted to throw at you this whole expected goals thing. Okay, I would say that over the long term, I feel like everything would average out, and it should be a pretty good stat. But for one playoff series, like when you were saying that Columbus, overachieved in their goals versus expected goals in that series versus Tampa Bay, like that can't account for, like, what if they were like sort of taking shots from low danger spots, but they're like strong shots. Like, expected goals doesn't take into account the velocity of the shot or like where the shot goes, like if it goes top corner or into the goalie's pads. You know what I mean? Like, just correct me if I'm wrong. Expected goals, that stat that you love to reference, that's only about where the shot came from on the ice, and that's it, right?
Yeah, and evaluating the threat level of shots from in that fashion. I mean, it depends on which formula you go by. Like, there's a few different formulas that have been developed. I've most recently been using the one over at Evolving Hockey, evolving-hockey.com. And so, yeah, they combine a whole bunch of factors that are reported in NHL's official scorekeeping data to try and determine the danger level of a shot. Elon, because this is the second time in as many episodes or 3 episodes.
Yeah, and again,
maybe we should try and get I'll see if they'll come on during the summer, and we can chat with them about how they make the stat and really hash it out.
I would love that. Like, I don't want to be a naysayer here. I really do believe this is a great stat that you reference, especially over a long term, like over a season. If you could say that this team had this many, this player had this many expected goals, but they only scored this many goals, or they scored too many, and it's a great way to see, like, okay, players who generally shoot from that position this many times score a different number of goals. But I just feel for like a really small sample size, there's going to be too many variables that aren't being accounted for. Like I said, like the velocity of a shot, I feel like makes a big difference on how dangerous the shot is.
Yeah, and there's also a fun game people play sometimes where, they'll say the specific expected goal rating for this shot was, whatever. And then, you watch the clip and it's like, well, why? Like, and you try and connect, like, whether that was an accurate danger level and try and, like, figure out the factors that led to it and if it's on the right track. So yeah, it's a fun thing, and maybe we'll have a great off-season summer series conversation about it. We'll make a note to talk about it.
Okay, good idea. I really like that idea, and that'll be fun. But okay, I guess we could go back to this series. It's been a great, exciting series, and I want to take a quick second to give kudos to Tuukka Rask. What a weird season for this guy, who, Brian, you in the almanac, you like famously said that you thought that Tuukka Rask was like a bit overrated, and you were actually telling people that Yaroslav Halak might be a really sneaky guy to draft, and you were like both so right and yet like wrong. Like Halak kind of stunk at the start of the year. Halak did take over as a starting goalie for a big chunk, and he was great, and he was pretty much great all season long. But at some point, Tuukka Rask turned it around, and your big prediction that Halak would be starting game one of the playoffs ended up not coming true. Tuukka Rask has been playing every single game for the Bruins, and he's having a great playoffs. He has a .932 save percentage in 12 games now. I don't see any reason why Halak will come in. Obviously, the Bruins are lucky that if something happens to Rask, they could have a lot of confidence that Halak will come in and be fine. But yeah, now like it makes me wonder now for next season, are we going to do the almanac, and is it going to be the whole thing over again where you're going to say, Tuukka Rask overrated, or like has this season changed your mind at all? Or is he just the type of goalie that if he has a slow start, you could feel decently confident that he'll eventually figure it out and turn it around? Like, Brian, actually in our joint league, there's 4 keeper spots. We have Holtby and Halak. This is a league where goalie wins are like really highly weighted, and also goalies are hard to come by. So you'd think if Rask is going to be the starting goalie on Boston, and like it seems like he's probably a keeper. But then again, last season I would have felt like a real idiot if I had kept Tuukka Rask, and then like at the start of the season it was looking like he wasn't even the starter anymore.
Yeah, I think we're set up to have a similar conversation in the offseason. I know Tuukka Rask has now vanquished Halak once, although you could say Halak vanquished Rask once as well. And next season, Halak is another year older. So is Rask. But if memory serves off the top of my head, Halak was born before Tuukka Rask. So, age might affect him a little more. I think what we're seeing, first we need to just clarify, like Tuukka Rask's season this year was not markedly better. It was actually worse. It was the worst season of his career. He had a .912 save percentage at even strength. Now keep in mind, there's more scoring in the NHL this year, so we can't quite call all things equal. Like I need to pull up his goal saved above average, which was probably about in line with the number it had been in the last few seasons in which Tuukka Rask was okay. He wasn't remarkable. He wasn't the Tuukka Rask that some people had, the image that some people have developed of him in their minds over that huge stretch where he was like a .930 goalie for a few years in a row. So he wasn't a very good goalie, and I don't think that beating him out for a number one job is such a tall mountain to climb. One thing that really worked out for him is that even though, and like I tried to even like find a dividing point for when Rask started picking up his game, there wasn't really one. Like if you look at just his games from the start of the calendar year, so say January 1st, he's still like a .913 goalie over 27 games, but he won 18 of those 27 games, only 5 regulation losses in those 27 games. So what I see is a goalie who played all right. He didn't cost his team games, and he played by a team that won him a whole bunch of games. So he was in net while the team was rolling, and that's just the way things worked out. I see the job as being reasonably open, and I do see arrested Tuukka Rask being a positive thing for the Boston Bruins. He played only 46 games this season, which is the lowest number of appearances since the lockout shortened 2012-13 season. So if you want to say, well, he played a huge proportion of those games, 36 of 48. So you have to go back to 2011, 2012 when he only played 23 times. And if I recall, because of injury. So this was a low workload season for Tuukka Rask, and I could see the Bruins just riding both Rask and Halak next year, splitting them both, keeping them both reasonably fresh and rested so they can, when they do play, they can be at the top of their game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they did this year, and it seems to have worked out so far. They're 1 win away from going to the conference finals. So, like last episode, you were talking about when you're thinking of goalies for next season, you're going to have like a couple guys who maybe are like the ones that you could kind of rely on and that you like the best. Like Vasilevsky is probably in there. Then you said there's going to be like sort of a pile of goalies where they all have similar chances of working out for you. Is Tuukka Rask like an above level guy, or is he a pile guy for you? It sounds like he's a pile guy if you think he's going to be sharing time with Halak.
Yeah, he's a pile guy for sure, and he's a tandem guy. Like I'd be really nervous about drafting him. I would hope in my draft that I draft Rask and then Halak just ends up being a free agent because nobody's like, well, I'm not going to take Halak on his own. Like it seems like these guys might only have value if you have them both. Otherwise, you're just crossing your fingers each week that you're going to get more than one start from the one of Halak or Resk that you actually have.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe they are a good tandem to own, and I've really vacillated on if I think it's a smart strategy to draft a tandem or not. But for a team like Boston, it might just be worth it to lock them down, and you have like a really good chance of getting a win every single time, especially when they both have such a similar chance of getting a lot of games. So right now, Rask seems like he's the guy, and maybe Halak that will make him a nice value pick in drafts next year, just like he was this year. Okay, one more player to discuss. This is actually not even a guy who's playing in this round, but we never got the chance to really talk about the Nashville Predators. They ended up losing to Dallas at the end of the first round. Of course, at the end of the first round. In the first round, they lost to Dallas. And I wanted to ask you about Philip Forsberg, who had a really disappointing playoffs, right? He only had 2 points in 6 games. And also, I looked like his regular season wasn't that great. Like, he was coming off a year. In 2017-18, Philip Forsberg had 64 points in 67 games for a 78-point pace. We called him like a sure thing to go into the 70-point club this season. It was just a matter of if he'd play enough games. And you know what? He didn't. He again missed time with injury. He only played 64 games in 2018-19. But you know what? He only had 50 points. And that was only good for a 64-point pace. So even if he kept up his pace all season long, he still wouldn't have joined the 70-point club. So he had a really big fall from what looked like an amazing breakout to from what looked like an amazing breakout 2 seasons ago. Where are you landing on Philip Forsberg now going into next season? Like, is he a guy that we should once again be thinking of as like a superstar in the league that we should expect at least 70 points from? Or maybe is he more of the 65-point pace guy that he really had been for most of his career before that breakout in 2017-18?
You say most of his career. There wasn't a huge chunk of his career. This was his age 24 season. And before he broke out, he was playing, like, he had 3 very good years beginning with his first full season in the league. When you break out as a 20-year-old with 26 goals and 63 points, and you follow that up with 64 points and 33 goals the next year, that's pretty good. That's a good resume to have by the time you're 21 years old. So Philip Forsberg still has room to grow for me. I think where people get confused about him is, you look at the year he had in 2017-18, where he was a point per game player. And you've got to keep in mind that season was fueled by an unsustainable shooting percentage at 5-on-5. He shot way better than he should have. And that's why, Elon, in the Almanac, we thought Forsberg would be good for 75 points in 18-19 rather than the 80 or 85 points I think others would have hoped for if Forsberg were to repeat that over-the-top shooting percentage and show some growth. And we know that.
Sorry, Brian, you're getting really glitchy. I don't know. Did you plug in?
Yeah. Can I try refreshing?
Oh, I guess so. Hope it doesn't break anything. All right. Did you guys hear the Brian glitchiness? Sorry, Michael, that your Boston goalies let you down in the playoffs. I had Rask, and did he not even win a game? I feel like he won a game for me in the finals, but actually my finals were 2 weeks. Like, there was 2 weeks of NHL action after my finals, so maybe by the time he sucked. Hey, Brian, you know what I'm saying. I'm really falling apart. I'm getting really tired. Okay,
you're doing great.
So Brian, can you go back and say this whole Forsberg thing again?
You want me to start from the start?
No, or at least I don't know, if you know where you were, go back a couple sentences. It was getting glitchy for a while.
Okay. I'll just start over.
Okay, you could probably get away with starting from you corrected me, or you didn't even correct me because you basically just repeated what I said, but you used the intonation of a correction when I said that he was a 65-point player for all of his career before. But you could keep that part in. And then you can go and say, you can say, what happened last season is he had a high shooting percentage. Go from that part.
Okay. So I think what people found confusing about Philip Forsberg was that in 2017-18, he was a point-per-game player, and everyone thought, he's arrived, but they might not have noticed that those point totals, particularly his 31 goals, were fueled by an unsustainable shooting percentage at 5-on-5, StatCheck, 26 goals, although they came in 67 games. So that means that Forsberg was on a 32-goal pace. So anyway, point made. So Elon, we thought that Philip Forsberg in our almanac, we said he'd be good for 75 points in 18-19, whereas I think others might have thought, 80, 85 points because he's going to keep scoring at a 32-goal pace, and he's going to have some natural growth as well because he's a young buck ready to continue developing his game, and he didn't quite get there. His goal scoring was even better in 2018-19 with more sustainable shooting percentages. So that's a positive. The assists went missing, however. So that's a big reason why Philip Forsberg's point totals went down. Why were those assists missing? Well, one of the reasons is because the Nashville power play was just a total and utter disaster. Like, just to contextualize, Philip Forsberg was only pacing for a 64-point season, even though he was on pace to score almost 35 goals, and he plays on the top line and the top power play. So what the heck, Nashville? What's wrong with your power play? And that's actually been a big topic since they were eliminated. That Predators power play, we lamented them all season long about how bad they were. Elon, there are only 10 players in the NHL who played over 100 and hang on, let me get this again. I'm just changing the filter. Okay. Elon, of all players who saw at least 190 minutes of power play time this season, which is like top line minutes, only 6 players scored fewer points on the power play than Philip Forsberg. He only had 10 points in 192 minutes. The only guys to score less, JT Compher, Brian Boyle, Brock Nelson, Wayne Simmons. Like, these are not high-end players. Derek Stepan, Brendan Gallagher. So you have Brendan Gallagher in there as another guy like Philip Forsberg who could probably improve his power play totals next year to have a rebound season. But Philip Forsberg does not belong in this class. And actually, very interestingly, Jamie Benn is right there with Philip Forsberg. So that's somebody who can absolutely rebound next season on the power play to get some of his fantasy value back that he lost this year. Anyway, Philip Forsberg's playoff performance this year was awful. It's more fuel for any doubters, which is great if they bite and they get down on Philip Forsberg, because I'm still happy to expect 75 points from him again next year. Yes, he burned us this year, but this year he ended up pacing for 64 points and only had 10 on the power play. It's not hard to imagine that somebody figures out how to fix that Nashville power play. There's a lot of talent there. If you're on a top power play in the NHL, it's not a stretch at all to say you're going to get between 18 and 25 points on that top unit. Philip Forsberg adds that to his totals. He's a 75-point player, no problem. So I haven't lost faith.
Damn. Okay. So a fun hot take from Brian. You're saying that people should maybe go in on Philip Forsberg next year. He might be underrated, and you might be able to get him a little bit later and end up getting a really good value pick out of him. So would you take Philip Forsberg over, say, Logan Couture in a draft next year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So yeah, I think you'll be able to do that. Or maybe draft Couture and then trade him to the Forsberg owner, get Forsberg plus for Couture before the season starts. I don't know. Maybe now I'm getting too fancy here. That's the playoff talk that I wanted to get into on this episode. We still have a whole fun second half of the show where we're going to talk about some of our predictions that I think I'm going to turn it to you, Brian, to talk about what we're going to do here. Before we get to that, let me just do a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, we've been doing our playoff pool for the patrons, and I wanted to check in. Brian, you called me out on the last episode. I just said what I always do is I go in and I see who's winning the playoff pool, and you were like, Elon, you only said it because you were in first place. Well, here I am. I'm no longer in first place, and yet I'm still going to say it.
Wow, so honorable.
Huge Long is in first place. I'm sure you're mad that I'm saying his team name, but you know what? He earned it.
I don't get it.
Oh, okay, great. So he earns the mention. He has Boston players, Carolina players.
Do you know it's a he?
I mean, the picture is, well, there's actually a man and a woman. So you're right, Brian. It could be a he or a she, but I'm guessing it's a he based on, well, our patron demographics tend to point.
Come on.
It's
very easy to go they here.
Oh, Brian. Oh, do you want me to start over?
Yeah, I do.
I guaranteed you it's a he.
Okay.
I would know, because I know, honestly, I know who our female patrons are who are playing in the pool, and
even so.
Okay.
Thank you.
What am I doing here? So you said I'm very honorable. So in first place now is okay. Ugh. So in first place now is Huge Long, 148 total points. Brian, I'm all the way down in third place with a mere 143 points. There's even a team in between us. Elon is a hoser, is right now like in contention with 147. So 1 point difference. Huge Long has got Bruins left. They lost a lot of Golden Knights, but they still have Burns and Karlsson on the Sharks. So obviously Huge Long is cheering for the Bruins and the Sharks to close out their series, and then they probably have a really good chance to win the series. Why are you laughing right now?
Just the more times you say the team name, the more
it bothers
clear the more clear it becomes that we shouldn't be saying it.
Hey, you know what? That's the
Elon is a hoser. It's time to make your move.
Yeah, Elon is a hoser has an amazing looking team. They've still only lost Evgeny Malkin. So they've got Bruins, they've got Hurricanes, they've got Sharks, and they've got just a ton of Sharks. They basically went all Sharks and then a couple St. Louis Blues. So yeah, if all the teams that are ahead in their series plus the Blues move forward, then I think Elon as a hoser is probably going to take this. I'm in third place, Brian, but I'm falling out. I lost those Vegas players also, unfortunately. I still have Blues. I still got Bruins. Still got a couple Hurricanes. But yeah, it doesn't look like I have a good chance against Elon as a hoser. Okay, so that is the update of our patron playoff pool. There's going to be a prize to the winner, some random junk from my mom's place. I found some really fun old-timey hockey books that are going to be mailed out to the winner, signed by yours truly and Brian, even if you want. So we'll arrange that. Brian, you could probably get over to my mom's house and sign that book, right?
I think I can make that happen.
You'll figure it out. Okay.
What if you win? Will you post it to yourself?
I'm not going to win, but sure. I guess I could sign the book for myself, or I could just save it as a prize for next season. That's my prize. I don't have to send away my book. I get to save it. One of them is called like hottest goalies or something, but it's just talking about who's playing well and not about their looks.
Oh, bummer.
That's one that I know some of our patrons might like. Okay, next up, Brian. So I've been actually away on vacation for the last couple of weeks. So I sort of turned this section of the show over to you. Like, Brian, can you deal with the second half of our show where I want to start looking into some almanac projections, like you said, but we got some help from our friends at Fantasy Ref. This is a very cool site, fantasyref.ca. They compare the projections of a bunch of different like sites that do fantasy projections, which finally this season we were a part of, though of course we only projected points. So a lot of other people like Dauber Hockey, has their guide or almanac where they're projecting like a whole bunch of stats. But anyway, Fantasy Ref, they compare all the different projectors, try to keep them honest. I love the idea behind it because, of course, if you're selling a product where you're making projections, you want to actually check and see how you did. Brian, we did okay. It was our first time at it. I think that when we do our almanac again this summer, we'll do even better because we'll have learned some lessons, and we're going to go over some of the players we got right and wrong, like you said, over the next few weeks and see what we can learn before we come up with our projections for next season. So let me just give a quick shout out. So it's fantasyref.ca/rankings to see the rankings. They also are creating a more formal guide. So if you want to check that out, if you go to fantasyref.ca/presale, you can see information of a cool guide that you could buy from Fantasy Ref. So Fantasy Ref helped us come up with some lists of players that they gave us the data so we could look into not only players we got right and wrong, but also like how we did compared to other projectors for other players. So Brian, why don't you tell us, I'm going to give the show to you. Who are we going to be talking about this week? What category? And then what players fit in this category?
Okay, this week's almanac review topic is very friendly to ourselves. We're going easy on us to begin. We're going to pat ourselves on the back and talk about a handful of players that we were right about and others were wrong. So what we did is we saw how we did, like how close we were in our projections to a player's performance. And then we checked how far off the other projectors were on average from us. So these are projections we nailed that we were different on than a lot of the other projectors out there. And we got it. So it paid off. And trust me, there are probably many more where we were way off from the average projection and it didn't work out. But here's a bunch that did. Beginning with, can I just go into it, Elon?
Let's do it.
Okay. Beginning with Andreas Athanasiou, who we talked about on the Almanac this past summer as somebody who we loved his shot rates. Like he was leading Detroit forwards by a fair margin in shots and shot attempts. But he was having this problem, which is that he wasn't getting enough of a sniff of good deployment situations. He was getting third line minutes tossed all around the lineup, but he was putting up essentially top line or at least top 6 shot generation numbers. So we said that if deployment could improve for him, he's going to be someone who can make an impact. And we said, if you see Athanasiou crack a solid power play unit and playing 17 minutes a game, take a chance on him. And so we did. Elon, I had him projected at 52 points. You had him projected at 50 points. The average projection for him was 39 points, and he ended up with 54 points. We exceeded all of our expectations. And the reason he did that, was not because of the start of the year. Athanasiou started the season in the dregs of the middle six, which is what we were afraid would happen. And his time on ice actually dropped a bit early on, but slowly but steadily, his time on ice and deployment rose through the year and crescendoed into first-line territory by the end of the year, thanks somewhat to the departure of Gustav Nyquist. By the last third of the season, Andreas Athanasiou was averaging 18 minutes a night, which was beyond our wildest dreams from the Almanac. And as we suspected, Athanasiou made the most of it. In his last 31 games, Athanasiou had 13 goals and 11 assists for 24 points and 84 shots on goal, so almost 3 per night. And there was a marked change in his production. Like that's amazing what he was able to do. And it's not a surprise when you look and you see what he was doing before those last 31 games. He was playing with Luke Glendening and Darren Helm, and then suddenly they started melting away from his line combos, and in came Gustav Nyquist and Anthony Mantha and Tyler Bertuzzi, and even Thomas Vanek was an improvement over Glendening and Helm, right? Athanasiou also saw an increase in his power play role, and that's also exactly what we hoped for. And through all this, the most important thing was that if Athanasiou was going to get this bump in deployment, he needed to hold his rate stats where they'd been in limited bottom 6 minutes, and he did that while he was on an actual honest-to-goodness scoring line and a top power play role for a 64-point pace over the final 2 months of the season. So the question is now, can Athanasiou do this again? I think yes. I think why not? He's got that big deployment. He made the most of it. So why wouldn't, like, Detroit could use some offense, especially because they've traded away Gustav Nyquist now. One really interesting thing to watch about Athanasiou next year, and we'll get at this in this year's Almanac, is that he might be one of these guys who converts at a higher than average shooting percentage. Like, he's shot 17%, he shot 19%. He's taking a lot of shots on net, and he seems legitimately dangerous. And I know there was some debate over whether he was just getting lucky or whether he was actually dangerous. And I think he's trending towards being actually dangerous, like an above 15% shooter. And that's really exciting considering how many pucks Athanasiou tends to throw on net. So that's why, I don't know, like, we'll do some more work in the summer to really research if he can be a 64-point player over an 82-game season next year. But he's certainly not going to be projected for 39 points again by the likes of the rest of the guides you might read.
Yeah, well, I definitely, no one is going to be projecting him for 38 points again next season. Those times are definitely behind us because, like you said, now he's getting decent deployment. We talked about the Red Wings at the end of the season, right? Like Larkin, Mantha, Bertuzzi, and Athanasiou all were so amazing at the end of the year. I was getting really excited. Of course, Filip Hronek was also doing well. I was like, oh man, what is this team? They're looking so, like, they're getting all these goals. Plus they have Filip Zadina coming in next season, you'd imagine. So I feel like, yeah, Athanasiou is probably going to get to play with at least one, maybe a couple good players, and I'll be very excited to see what they do. And we'll have to make this big decision of, are we going to project him for like 64 points, like you said, that what he was pacing for at the end of the season? Are we going to be more conservative and just keep him at, let's see here, what did he have overall on the season? He had 54 points, so a 58-point pace. Even like projecting for 60 points seems like not conservative, but it kind of is, right? If you're saying that he got 58 points overall, 58-point pace overall, but a lot of that was due to the end of the season when he had better deployment. That's the deployment we expect him to have next season. Then why shouldn't he be able to do better than that? So that'll be really fun. And yeah, if somehow he falls late in your drafts, I'm really into Andreas Athanasiou, especially if your league counts shots. It's always great to get those players that you could depend on. And he had 216 shots this past season, his first time over 200, and hopefully not the last, only 24 years old. So it'll be really fun to see what he has moving forward. So Brian, that's great. We got Athanasiou right. William, actually, one of our patrons, just posted on the Facebook group. He was like listing a bunch of players and asking who his keeper should be. And Athanasiou was on the list, and Andre Kasha was on the list, as was Philip Grubauer's, I believe. So in the end, we were all just saying keep Grubauer because he's like clearly cementing himself as a starting goalie. But if I would have suggested one of the skaters, I probably would have been juggling between Kasha and Athanasiou. Kasha's a guy who, we still didn't get to see what he could do because he got injured again. Athanasiou seems like a more sure thing. Kasha could be very interesting. I don't know. We don't really have to get into that conversation, but I feel like both of these guys could be really good value picks going to next season. So William has a fun decision to make if he can keep either of these guys.
Yeah, for sure. And Athanasiou is a legit consideration when you're thinking about that tier of player. I think I'd still prefer Kasha. I think the ceiling's higher. But Athanasiou, and it's funny, like I'm going back looking at our almanac, Elon, and we included a change log in it. And if people go back and listen to our almanac, they'll hear us say 45 points for Athanasiou. But we did change it in late. You changed your projection in late August, and I changed mine about a week later for Athanasiou when we heard that Henrik Zetterberg wasn't likely to play in 18-19, and we thought that was a great opening for Athanasiou to become the second line center, which didn't happen to start the season, but eventually it did, which is what got him up close to where we projected him.
Cool, man, Brian, I'm feeling so great right now. Like, who's next? Who else did we get right?
Another guy we got right that most others didn't was Jacob Vrana. So he ended up with 47 points, which, Elon, was our average projection. I had 50, you had 45. So you average that out. We had him at 47 and a half when, again, the pack of projectors on average, had him at 39 points. So why did we have Vrana higher? I said in our almanac that we saw two reasons for optimism with Vrana. First was that this was going to be Vrana's age 22 season. And so we saw a lot of great things in the small contributions he's made, that he can just keep growing, keep taking steps forward. And also, it feels like ancient history by now, but he was in Barry Trotz's doghouse. And he could never really get rolling. So we thought that a new coach and a fresh start would do him some good. And it did. His time on ice rose to 14 minutes per game. This is Jacob Vrana again, which wasn't quite as high as we'd hoped. And he also didn't actually see a rise in his power play role. Of course, it's pretty hard to crack that top power play in Washington. Things are pretty set there. So that's why he didn't quite get as high. Elon, I said 50 points and he ended up with 47. And that's because his time on ice was still limited. It was better, but still limited. But the good news is that Vrana's shot rates did stay pretty. And in the limited time he did see each night, his line mates were great. Now, I don't know if you remember, Elon, I was on a campaign to say that Jacob Vrana should spend more time on the top line than Tom Wilson in 18-19, which even with Tom Wilson penalties and suspensions didn't bear out. I wasn't successful. The top line is Ovechkin's line, and Vrana rarely played with Ovechkin. Oshie and Connolly were the two most frequent guys lining up on Vrana's opposite wing, but Vrana did spend 80% of his 5-on-5 minutes playing with either Evgeny Kuznetsov or Nicholas Backstrom as his center, which automatically puts him or anyone in a position to succeed. So that's a really good sign. And again, unfortunately, still saw like third line minutes, even though he had top six line mates. But let's see if in his age 23 season, Vrana can keep chipping away at getting more shifts in minutes, because at this point, he's right on the doorstep of breaking 50. He's playing with the right guys. Vrana just needs to get out there more often. He's trending slowly but surely in that direction. So I'm going to feel confident when we do our almanac saying that Vrana is going to be a 50-point player for starters, and we'll see if maybe we can add a couple more to his projection. And I don't know what the pack will think, if they'll still be low on him.
I'm actually going to be lower on him, Brian. So one thing I'm very concerned about with Vrana is, I don't know if you recall, in the playoffs, he got bumped back to the third line again. He wasn't playing with Kuznetsov or Backstrom. It was Hagelin playing with Oshie and I guess Kuznetsov or Backstrom. I don't remember. Oh yeah, Ovechkin was mainly playing with Backstrom, it looks like, at least in the last game. But yeah, then TJ Oshie got injured, so then Vrana got back playing with Kuznetsov. But yeah, it was Carl Hagelin that bumped him down to the bottom six. So it just seems like Vrana still hasn't really cemented himself. Like when the going got tough and they needed that production, they went with Carl Hagelin and said, I don't even know if Carl Hagelin's going to be back with the Capitals next year, but it gives me cause for concern. Like, he's not a guy like Athanasiou. I feel like with Athanasiou, I'm like pretty confident that he's going to get top 6 minutes moving forward. That seems to be the direction. With Vrana, it's likely for sure, but I don't know if it's like 100% yet. And yeah, that Tom Wilson thing we should mention, he had a pretty good season, right? He had a 52-point pace overall, 40 points in 63 games. So definitely credits Tom Wilson. I guess maybe when we get to the projections that we got wrong, I'd imagine some people thought he would continue that nice pace that he was on in the playoffs last year. And those who did, really got themselves a nice win in their hat, because Wilson was a very viable guy in fantasy, especially in leagues that count hits. 200 hits in only 63 games to go along with his 52-point pace.
Yeah, much to my chagrin, Tom Wilson remained very valuable this year. It seemed like if you had him in a cap league that has hits at $5 million, that's pretty good value. I'm surprised he lived up to it.
Amazing value, Brian. Yeah. Say the words.
It's amazing value. So great for you, Tom Wilson owners. We'll see if he can do it for the next 5 years that he signed at $5.2 million for. Elon, you bring up a good point about Jacob Vrana not showing up when the Caps needed him to, also not when a lot of his fantasy owners needed him to. Like, this is sort of a Pyrrhic victory, because I had Vrana. I believed in him. He was on my roster for large stretches of the season. I think he panned out for me like once or twice out of maybe like 11 or 12 streaming tries. So it just wasn't really working out. It'll be really interesting to see. The Caps have a lot of movement happening in their forward core next season. Hagelin's UFA, Burakovsky and Yaskin are RFAs. Brett Connolly is a UFA. Devontae Smith-Pelly, well, they don't seem terribly committed to him, but he's a UFA. Vrana himself is an RFA. So we're gonna see. I don't know. Hopefully, all these contracts and how it shakes out is going to give us some sense of the order of things in Washington heading into next season. That's it.
All right. Yeah, I think I'm going to probably end up putting him down for 45 points once again. I can't see myself going to 50, but of course we'll do lots of research. We should actually say we've been like saying it without actually saying it. Yes, like Brian and I, we've decided, barring, I don't know, some really crazy unforeseen circumstance, we're going to do an almanac again next season. So for everyone who supported us and bought it last year, we really hope you'll come back along with us this year. It was a ton of work, but it was so much fun. It was great hearing your feedback. And I think we've learned a lot. And I think we're going to come out with an even better product next year. So just as a reminder, this is like 31 one chapter per team, where we're going to basically, it's like an episode of Keeping Karlsson every single chapter, where we're going to break down every single fantasy relevant player and end each one coming up with a projection. And if you buy the almanac, you get, the list of projections, and you get to watch live if you want, a lot of stuff. Like, we're still working out everything, but actually we have set up a page for now. So you can check out keepingkarlsson.com/almanac if you want to get in on the pre-sale. Pre-sale is officially open. If you're a patron, we're going to have a discount offer for patrons, so you can maybe wait on that. But yeah, very, very excited for that. We'll let the patrons know how to do that. So I guess I should also mention, since we didn't do an ad, Brian, it's been an ad-free episode of Keeping Karlsson. keepingkarlsson.com/patron. You could sign up for any amount to support us over the summer. You could sign up for $1 a month, and you can get in on our Patreon cast, which we're going to do on Wednesday, which is going to be a lot of fun. You can get in on the Facebook group. You can get in on these like Dave rankings that are awesome. So, and plus you'll get this offer to get a discounted version of the Almanac pre-order. So keepingkarlsson.com/patron and keepingkarlsson.com/almanac should get you everywhere you need to go. And yeah, hopefully people will buy the almanac. If we don't do it, obviously we'll figure out a way to give you a refund if you do the pre-sale. So, risk-free. If you trust me, I'll make it right. But I think we're going to do it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Brian, so do you have any other players you want to discuss that we got right, that the others got right? This is fun, right? Like, the next few episodes, we're going to be talking about all the players we got wrong and beating ourselves up over it. So that's why we're going to take this quick little victory lap with like 5 players or whatever before we really dig into why we're big dumb idiots and actually try to learn some lessons. But maybe we're even learning lessons from looking at what we got right first. So yeah, who do you want to talk about next?
Well, I'll mention another cap while we're in Washington. John Karlsson on the blue line had an outstanding 2017-18 season. He had 68 points, and we looked at his point totals and said, yeah, he can do that again. He had crazy power play deployment. He saw 77% of all the available power play minutes for blue liners in Washington. And we were like, why would they change that? It worked really well. They won the Stanley Cup. And so we stuck to our guns. Elon, I said he'd get 68 again. You said he'd get 65. The average projector said 59. So a lot of people saw regression from him. And he ended up beating even my optimistic projection. He ended up with 70 points this season, which is fantastic. And the reason he was able to do that was, well, exactly what we said on the almanac. His power play percentage not only held, like the share of minutes that he got, it actually rose. He, instead of seeing 77% share of his team's power play minutes, he saw an 84% share of his team's power play minutes, which adds up to about another 24 total power play minutes on the season. That was huge for him. One really interesting piece here is that he actually took about 50 fewer shots than the previous year, and only had about 2 fewer goals, which still meant that his shooting percentage stayed about the same. But he took fewer shots. He got more assists. Way to go, John Karlsson, for proving all the haters wrong.
Like he's definitely a guy who, like, I'm going to be interested to know where we're even going to rank him next year among other defensemen, right? Like, I feel like last season it was obvious. You go Karlsson, Burns, Hedman, and then you had a group of sort of the next group, which I believe a lot of people would have, like Klingberg, Gostisbehere, who definitely not going to be there next year, and like John Karlsson. I feel like this year it really becomes interesting, like, or I mean, projecting for next year, because John Karlsson, I think, was like more valuable than Hedman in most leagues. Like, I'm going to rank in the cupful scoring. So the Keeping Karlsson Ultra Patron Fantasy League, we have like 5 points for a goal, 3 points for an assist, and then some hits and block stuff. I'm just like ranking all the defensemen by their average points. Brent Burns, number 1. Letang, Giordano in the conversation. Yeah, but John Karlsson is there ahead of Erik Karlsson, who, you know, he had injury trouble. I'm looking just average points per game. John Karlsson was basically even, but a little bit ahead of Erik Karlsson. And yeah, ahead of Hedman. Like, I feel like John Karlsson might be the defenseman that you draft second or third. Like, I'd say Brent Burns is the obvious number 1 in like any format. And then Chris Letang, you know, you have your injury concerns. Mark Giordano, like, he had an amazing season, but hard to project him repeating that. And we'll get into him, of course, at some point, definitely in the almanac. But yeah, I feel like John Karlsson might be even with Erik Karlsson in terms of potential fantasy value for next year. Is that crazy to say?
I don't think so, because with Erik Karlsson, well, a lot is up in the air about where he's going to land, and everyone is wondering about his health in general. Like, is he playing injured now in the playoffs, or is this an injury that's just never going to go away? So yeah, John Karlsson seems like a reliable player. What he's going to need is for Alex Ovechkin to continue beating off any kind of age-related regression. That really helped John Karlsson. So that would be a factor for me next year in thinking, maybe it's time to just take him down a few points, because we can't expect quite as much out of him. I'm saying I'm not saying that's what I'm going to do. I'm saying if I were to take him a few points down, that would probably be the reason why. Otherwise, I can't really see one. I mean, John Karlsson is not like a young player himself, right? He's been in the league for a decade now. So he's going to have his own age-related regression to work off soon enough. But like that top power play in Washington is just so deadly, and he's doing such a good job there. So why not? Isn't it crazy that the Capitals went out and got Kevin Shattenkirk, like, just in retrospect, to feel like they needed another power play quarterback when they had John Karlsson there? Like, he was a 55-point player for a while, but that's because they never fully committed to him.
Yeah, well, I guess that was the push they needed when they saw that Shattenkirk wasn't even that good for them. Like, and they saw John Karlsson could basically do the same thing, maybe better. And then they learned the lesson. And now look at Kevin Shattenkirk. I just saw on Roto-World a couple days ago that the Rangers might even buy him out. So he'll be an interesting guy to discuss. Maybe he'll be a good sleeper pick late in drafts. Though we said that this year, and that didn't pan out. So I don't know if I'm going to go too hard on the Kevin Shattenkirk train for next year, but he'll be an interesting guy to watch. Yeah. Okay. This is my dream draft, Brian. Do you think this is even possible in a 12-team league? Could I get like Connor McDavid number 1, and then Sagan and John Karlsson at the turn at the end of round 2 and the start of round 3? That's probably very optimistic, but that would be my dream. I think
it's totally doable. Like, Sagan and Karlsson are both first round caliber players that a lot of people don't consider them to be. For, like, you know, everyone thinks, you know, you have Karlsson, Burns, Hedman at the top of the defense pile, and then there's a break for however many rounds until someone's ready to take the next one. So I think you could steal John Karlsson there. The question is, do you need to steal him there?
Oh, come on. If you're not going to get him in the 4th round.
No, like, you shouldn't try.
Yeah, that's insane. Like, but yeah, I'm looking at our Patreon rankings now. Like I said, we're up to 17. John Karlsson not only hasn't been ranked, but he doesn't even have a vote yet. Actually, I'm currently on a vote for Andrei Vasilevsky, but give me John Karlsson. I'm switching my vote. I'm writing it in right now. I'm switching to Karlsson. Boom. John
Wow, the
Karlsson.
typing sounds really make it convincing.
That
Like
makes it
we know
official.
you're doing it.
Yeah, you could believe me. If you're a patron, you would know. You'd be able to believe me because you'll see it right there on the Facebook group. Okay. Who do you got next for us? Who else did we nail?
We also nailed a former teammate of Nail, Nathan McKinnon in Colorado, which
Oh
is
wow,
crazy, right? Like Nathan McKinnon,
that was a
you would,
deep pull. That was a deep pull. A former teammate of Nail Yakupov, Nathan
yeah,
McKinnon. Okay.
yeah, like you would think especially after this season, it's like, was anybody not convinced that Nathan McKinnon could continue being Nathan McKinnon after his massive 2017-18 campaign? And the answer is yes. A lot of people remained unconvinced that McKinnon could keep that number quite as high as it was in 17-18. So in 2018-19, Elon McKinnon ended up with 99 points. I projected him for 100. You had him at 95, and the average projector had him at 91. So about a 10 points difference there in our projections for McKinnon. So the reason why I was so high on him going into 18-19 was in the almanac. I said that his 17-18 performance was elite any way you sliced it. McKinnon had massive shot rates, big raw shot totals, extra power play time. And I did point out a few places where regression was possible for Nathan McKinnon heading into 18-19. First, his shooting percentage. He was a 7% shooter. I'm going to say that again. He was shooting only 7% over 3 years heading into 17-18, at which point he was a 13% shooter. So almost doubled his established shot percentage. And then in 18-19, he did hold it up at 11%. So he did stay closer to that 13% rather than falling back down to the 7%. So that's one place where he was able to hold off regression. Another place where he was challenged to hold it off was his 5-on-5 on-ice shooting percentage. It was way up at 10.5% in 17-18. That did regress 2 percentage points down to a more average 8% in 18-19. Also, McKinnon's 5-on-5 IPP in 17-18 went from being historically in the mid-60s all the way up to 86%. And so that did regress back down to 70% in 18-19. So there are two places, his on-ice shooting percentage and IPP at 5-on-5, where McKinnon regressed as expected. So the question is, how did he still manage 99 points? Well, the first reason is that he played a full 82 games. Remember that in 17-18, he had, oh gosh, I should pull this up. Sorry. He had...
I'm going to drop a crazy tidbit on you when you're done. You're going to love it.
Great. He had 97 points in 74 games, which means that McKinnon was pacing for 108 points that season. So, like, even considering those regressions that we thought might happen, that still doesn't take him far down below 100 if you're just doing like a rough regression based on that stuff. The second reason why McKinnon was able to still have a near 100-point season was because the Colorado power play continued getting all these power play opportunities. We talked about in the almanac about how Colorado was drawing all these penalties. Can we count on them to repeat that skill, or was it just a random thing? I don't know if it was random still. They seem like they can legitimately draw penalties, as the Avalanche led the league in penalties drawn once again in 2018-19, and they made their opponents pay with a 22% success rate on the power play. And so McKinnon actually improved upon his 32 power play points in 17-18, picked up 37 power play points in 18-19. Wow. And the third reason why McKinnon still managed a near 100-point season this year is that he is a freaking workhorse. Elon, guess how many forwards in the NHL averaged more time on ice per game at all strengths? So penalty kill, power play, even strength than Nathan McKinnon.
0.
I mean, that would be really great, but 6. So
Still good.
you have McDavid and Draisaitl at the top. Then you have Patrick Kane, Barkov, Kopitar, Couturier, Nathan McKinnon. That's the list of the 7 players who averaged more than 22 minutes of ice time. And the amazing thing is, all those guys played between 78 and 82 games. Like, that's insane. These guys are playing every single night at all strengths, just like thrown on the ice in every situation. to exhaustion. And look at McKinnon still tearing it up in the playoffs. In fact, you look at the list, he is the only guy still playing. A lot of like teams that miss the playoffs do that to their players. But the Avalanche have a player who just squeaked in and still is bringing them through the playoffs right now. So that is why Nathan McKinnon was able to meet our lofty expectations of another 100-point season. And Elon, it's very hard for me to imagine anybody thinking McKinnon will not get at least within a couple points of 100 points again in 1920, right?
I agree with you, though it is pretty crazy, this power play opportunities thing, right? Like, I thought that was my like brilliant hot take of the almanac. Like, if I had the one smart thing I said, it was like Colorado had so many power play opportunities, so if they fall back to league average, then, you know, even if they continue scoring like a 22% rate on the power play like you said they did this year, like you know, like they're still gonna have just so many fewer power play goals just from fewer opportunities, and that would hurt McKinnon. And yet it's crazy, they once again led the league in power play opportunities. Now it's like, I still feel like it's unlikely. I'd love for someone to go back in history. I guess we could go back and do this research and see how often has a team stayed the number one team in power play opportunities over like 10 years or like 5 years. Like, it feels like maybe this was lucky again. Probably there's like some skill. Obviously there is skill in drawing penalties, but like they probably will fall from number one. I just feel like it. They won't be number one for a third year in a row. So that might be a fewer power play points available, but I still think like 100 points for Nathan McKinnon is probably like within reach for sure, like 95 to 100 points. I'll definitely be happy to project that again. But that's the one thing I'm still watching for next season. Like, will Colorado still get all these power play opportunities? Because they had 286. If they fall to league average, like 237 was 15th in the league. That's like 50 fewer opportunities. That's going to be, you know, like 10 fewer points if I'm doing the quick math in my head.
Well, they score on 22% of their opportunities. So 22%. Oh, you figured it out. About 11 fewer power play points available. And that's not to say Nathan McKinnon would be in on all 11, but he'd be on like, I don't know, you'd think 7 or 8 of them. Yeah. Drawing penalties is a repeatable skill, but I don't know if anyone's looked at it on a team level. You know, like if a team ever exceeds all the numbers of their individual players added up in terms of penalties drawn, that'll be a fun thing to look at for our almanac this year.
We need an intern. If anyone's interested in becoming an unpaid intern, like, do high schools still have this thing where you need volunteer hours in order to graduate? I know that was a thing in Ontario after I had graduated, but if that exists, and if you're a high school student and you want some unpaid work doing research for our almanac, message us at Keeping Karlsson or hit us up on the Facebook group, because I feel like we say stuff like this all the time. Like, someone should do this work. If someone wants to do it, I don't know.
I feel like we might do it as part of the almanac, but if some high school person wants to do it for us, by all means.
Oh, the other thing, remember last episode?
We'll shout you out on the show.
Hey, that's so much. That's valuable payment.
Think of the exposure.
We'll tweet your handle out. So like to our hundreds and hundreds of followers, they'll see your Twitter handle. Also, last episode, Brian, remember we made a shout out if anyone wants us to advertise their product on our show. We're still happy to do that. No one took us up on it. So I'll say that I like, I don't know, whatever you want me to. So I'm within reason. I don't even know why I'm saying this. We're fine to not have ads. We don't need ads.
Test Elon on that. Tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson or write us keepingkarlsson@gmail.com and see to what depths Elon will go.
I feel like if you offer us $5 and no one offers us more, we might as well just do it. So give us your lowball offer. We might promote you on our next episode. Brian, are we done here? Do you want to pat ourselves on the back? One or two more players?
Yeah, we could do 2 more.
Okay, let's do it. Why don't you say both of them now? Let's do a lightning round.
I'm ready to. I'll talk about one quickly and then the other quickly because I just need to look up some stuff about the other one.
Okay.
While you talk.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Evgeny Dadonov over in Florida. The Pack had him getting 63 points. Elon, you and I were more optimistic than that. I said 72. You said 75. The actual number for Dadonov was 70. So we did well in expecting big things from Evgeny Dadonov, and this one didn't go so deep. I think the one thing we were worried about in the almanac is Florida had that like Huberdeau, Hoffman, Dadonov, Barkov, and who am I missing?
I wasn't listening. What are you saying? Players on Florida?
The all the forwards.
Hoffman, Barkov, Trocheck. Did you say Trocheck?
Trocheck. Okay, I'm just gonna go back and say Trocheck.
Okay.
And Trocheck, and we weren't sure if Dadanov, like there's a 5 forwards, if Dadanov had room on the top power play unit. At the same time, we mentioned how Dadanov did not really capitalize on his power play role a whole lot in 17-18. Yeah, he played on the top unit, but he only picked up 13 points. Doing so, we saw a lot of sustainable numbers in his underlying numbers. He paced for 72 points last year. We said, hey, he could probably do it again, maybe even improve a little bit. And there he was with 70 points this year, helping prove us right. He did stay on the top power play for the majority of the year. Trocheck's injury made that a little easier to handle for him, but he was remarkably consistent. Dadanov scored exactly as many goals, although he played 8 more games, as he did last season. He had 5 more assists and 7 more shots on goal, 4 more power play points. So everything was like pretty much even with the year before in his age 29 season. Heading into his age 30 season, I'm still optimistic he's a 70-point player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hashtag Team Dadanov all the way. You know that about me, Brian. Like, I don't see why he can't do it again. Like, he was great in the KHL. He came in, he did exactly what we said he would do, and he continues to do it as long as he stays on the top power play, which he was able to this season. It seems like Vincent Trocheck might not be the top power play player that we assumed that he was. And of course, again, next year, we'll have to figure out what Florida does again with these forwards. But I'm very confident with Dadanov, especially if he's playing with Barkov. Because Barkov, I think, is a real stud. Like, I can see us projecting him for 100 points next year. And, maybe you'll say that's a bit too high. But, I really love Dadanov. And I love Barkov even more, which makes me love Dadanov more. It's a nice cycle of codependence there.
That was another piece of our projections. We were like, we think Barkov can take another step forward. And I think he did establish himself as an all-world top-line NHL centerman this year. So that also helped Dadanov keep up with his 17-18 point totals.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, Brian, Prince in the chat room here says, imagine what Dadanov could do with Coach Q behind the bench. Do you think a coaching change could be? I mean, it can't be good for him because he already had great deployment. The only thing is maybe it could be bad for him if he gets bumped from playing with Barkov. So maybe that's a little wrench where we don't know how the lines will shake out with a new coach. But for now, I'm going to assume that Dadanov stays with Barkov.
Yeah, I think that's safe to assume for now. Okay, finally, last player that we're going to talk about that we got right and others didn't was Jack Eichel, believe it or not. He was a lightning rod for debate, as Elon, well, I'll remind everyone at the end of this exactly what a bet was that we made preseason. The Pack had Eichel getting 76 points. He ended up with 82 points, which is just one less than I had him for. I had him for 83 points. Elon, you rounded up to 85, which put you a little further out than I was. But we were pretty much bang on in projecting Jack Eichel. The one concern we had with him, and I wonder if this was the concern with other projectors, was that Ryan O'Reilly, this was his first year not in Buffalo, and he was doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. And so Eichel was going to be tasked with having to do that. And I think the concern was that was going to take away from his ability to put up offense. In fact, it didn't. And that's more or less the end of the story. He kept his 5-on-5 numbers pretty similar. And he did improve on the power play. There was a really ugly number from his power play efforts in 17-18. It was 4%. That was his shooting percentage. So that was unsustainably low. He got it up to 12% this past year. His IPP was also really low 2 seasons ago. That also regressed in a friendly way for Jack Eichel. So regression worked in his favor so that he ended up with 26 power play points, 6 more than he had in 17-18. And that helped him pace. He paced for 87 points. If he played all 82 games, he ended up with 82 points in 77 games. But his point pace was about 10 points better this year. And that's without Ryan O'Reilly around to help take some of those defensive matchups. Although I still don't think the Sabres use Eichel for a lot of those defensive matchups. But it always helps to have, someone else to attract attention or to take on heavy assignments when your coach might want them to. Eichel was sort of the only player that the Sabres could really lean on this season. I guess you could add Jeff Skinner, although he came and went.
And Sam Reinhart.
To some extent, right? He also came and went at times.
Well, that was the line, right? That was the top line. And it'll be interesting next season because Jeff Skinner is a UFA. So Buffalo's going to have to figure something out, a lot like the Islanders. Are they going to re-sign Skinner? Maybe they could go after some of these Islanders guys. Maybe they can get Eberle and Anders Lee and Brock Nelson and who knows. But like Buffalo's going to have to get some players for Eichel to play with here. Eichel and Reinhart, right? Like Casey Middlestat will be a year older. They've got Ristolainen and Dahlin on D if they even keep Ristolainen. Buffalo also has to figure out their goaltending. Carter Hutton wasn't so great, and Linus Ullmark, I guess we hope that one day he'll be like this amazing starting goalie. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but Ullmark also kind of disappointed in the few starts he got near the end of the season. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be fun to think about the Sabres going to next season. Luckily, we do the Almanac after the free agent deadline of July 1st passes, so we have a little bit more information, and we'll know who Eichel's going to have to play with to help him get up to a similar point pace again. Brian, It seems like all the players that you listed. Sorry, I'm just talking like a crazy guy right now. Wait, sorry. Yeah. So I'm just talking up a storm right now. Brian, it seems like all the players you listed here were players that we got right and the majority got wrong, and we were like higher than the majority. I don't know if maybe in another episode we're going to be able to pat ourselves in the back for players that we like got right by saying that they're going to get lower. I'd love to do some more padding here because right now we're saying all the players that we got right by saying they're going to be better than what everyone else thought. There must be some others in the other direction. But.
You would think so. The way I was parsing the data, this is what I came up with as the most obvious examples, but we'll also have to parse it the other way to see to see if there were others. And I would love to pat ourselves on the backs for another episode.
Yeah.
Coming up in our Almanac reviews, we're going to talk about players that we were too low on where other projectors were close to being right, players we were too high on where other projectors were close to being right on average. So we're gonna point out our glaring errors and try to learn from them. One thing that was not a glaring error, Elon, that I was laughed off of the podcast for suggesting at the start of the season, I said Sebastian Aho is going to outscore Jack Eichel. Do you know what their point totals were this season?
Oh my God. But you're going to account for point pace, right? Like, give me the point paces.
Oh, well, if I accounted for point pace, I'd lose.
Okay.
But I was told I would be so... Jack Eichel, 82 points in 77 games. Sebastian Aho, 83 points in 82 games. Yeah. I bet if you added his playoff point pace, though, like, he'd be ahead of Eichel.
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, Aho's a little bit below a point per game, so actually it would hurt his overall. But you nailed it, Brian. Like, Aho was the superstar that you expected him to be, and next season, I don't think people will be projecting Aho like so far away from Eichel like they were this year. So no, definitely you could pat yourself on the back for coming close. But I'm pretty sure if we go back to the recorded footage, we were talking about point pace and not just total points, because obviously it's not fair to like ding me.
But I knew I was taking a swing, and I was way closer than anyone would have thought.
Yeah. Brian, congratulations. You're a brilliant genius. That's why I do this show with you every couple weeks over the summer and every week during the regular season, because I get to talk to this brilliant brain of Brian Comm. And I hope everyone else enjoyed hearing from the brilliant brain of Brian Comm and the inane ramblings of Elon Dubrovsky in this week's episode of Keeping Karlsson. But that takes us to the end. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate you listening to us over the summer. I know like the advice doesn't seem as prescient. It's not something you need to deal with right now, but hopefully we're planting some seeds that are going to help you draft well and build your team well going into next season. So if you like the show, of course, you can follow us on Twitter. We once in a while come up with clever tweets. I had my really brilliant tweet, Brian, while I was on vacation. I thought about it. Wait a minute. If Columbus and Carolina go to the finals in the East, and then if San Jose and St. Louis go to the finals in the West, that'll be 2 C teams in the East and 2 S teams in the West. Has that ever happened, that the conference finals have both had teams whose location labels started with the same letter? So I wrote out that tweet. I was expecting 1,000 retweets and likes. Turns out this happened in 2008, very recently. There was Dallas and Detroit, and then Philly and Pittsburgh. So whatever. I thought it was this. Anyways, you follow us on Twitter, you get gold like that. Brian also has some pretty clever tweets on there as well sometimes. You could, like I said, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. You could support us as a patron. Ignore everything you see on that site about you need to pay $5 to get stuff over the summer. Just sign up as a patron. You get everything that's listed there. Okay, we'll add you to the group. We'll invite you to all the patron casts. It'll be a good time. You get the show notes also. And then also keepingkarlsson.com/almanac. If you want to get in early on the pre-sale, help get Brian and I pumped, knowing people are actually going to listen to this thing once again, we'd love you to go ahead and do that. And you get the pre-sale, and you're going to get every single chapter when it comes out, September 1st, the latest. But who knows? Maybe earlier. Definitely after free agency. That's when we'll start, planning the recordings once we know how these teams are shaking out. Okay, so that's our episode. Brian, if unless you have something else, I think we can cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and supported by our patrons. We have a lot of people who have joined in lately on this $1 thing. So again, keepingkarlsson.com/patron is the place to go. Welcome to our newest ones, William, Chrissy, Mike, Tony. Glad to have you on board. Oh, and Wesley, you too, everybody. Okay, this episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Pool, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Charting Hockey, Cap Friendly, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, Roto World, and Yahoo. But most of all, Elon, Fantasy Ref. Can you remind everyone where they can go to get the Fantasy Ref goods, the projecting, the projectors? You're muted. You're still muted. You're muted. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, that would be pretty crazy if they were projecting the projectors for next season. They're not doing that, but they are rating the projectors. Yeah, fantasyref.ca, and you can check out. I can tell you these links. What's it called?
Well, yeah. I could tell you the links.
I'm assuming it links from their site. Okay. fantasyref.ca, and that could take you to their rankings and their pre-sale for their guides. Check it out. They really helped us out for this show. Great job as always, Brian. Looking forward to doing this all again in a couple of weeks where we'll break down, I guess, the majority of the 3rd round of the NHL playoffs.
Cannot wait, and we will also hold ourselves accountable for some of the errors we made in last Almanac. So if you don't like us, you'll really want to hear that episode because you're still listening. You hate listening to all of Keeping Karlsson. All right. Until then, until 2 weeks from now, please keep on keeping Karlsson.
Maybe John Carlson. Okay. Bye.
That would just be keep on keeping Karlsson.
Oh, well.
No, they'd both be the same.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
And then, Brian, we're talking on Wednesday. I'll post that later tonight. 9 p.m.?
Cast.
You like 9 p.m., right? Not
I think we said 8:30.
I could do whatever. So you just could tell me what you want.
I already did.
8:30. Damn, cool. That's a strange time. It's fun. People don't generally do that time for things.
8 is too early. 9 is too late.
Yeah, it's the perfect spot. It's the porridge that's just right. Oh, you're going to start reading fun fairy tales to Timo Meyer. That'll be so cute.
Yeah, and cool books too.
What's your favorite fairy tale? Do you have a book that's like your first book you want to read?
No, we've already been reading.
Oh, of course. What do I know about parenting? All right.
Daily.
Let me get out of here. You know what, Brian?
The mistake was buying a bunch of books that we like when she can't even understand them, because we're giving her our best readings of them. By the time she's actually ready to really understand and engage with the books, well, it'll be our 1,000th time reading it. We should have just bought these garbage books to just introduce the concept of literacy, and then we could be really excited when we be freshly reading these books to her for the first time.
Yeah, you should read her the Keeping Karlsson show notes or something right now. Just maybe that'll be just as interesting as anything else.
If someone would like to make illustrations for the show notes, that would be really great. I would read those to her.
I mean, probably you could just find pictures of hockey players and show her those, the players that we discussed. Michael's saying, get together in Toronto soon. Brian, if you ever have plans to come visit Toronto, I'd be down to have a get together.
Okay, it's possible. It's possible.
Okay.
In June, and if not, maybe in the first couple of weeks of July.
That's awesome. Obviously give me lots of notice so I can make sure I'm in town, and I would love to.
What, you're gonna go? You love your apartment. Why would you go on vacation again?
I don't know. I have to. That's part of being married. You have to make compromises. And sometimes you have to leave your apartment, even though you'd rather just stay home. Okay, I'm going to go. I'm actually speaking of my great apartment. I could finally watch episode 3 of Game of Thrones because it wasn't available to me while I was out of the country. I'm so far behind. I haven't been too spoiled. I know a couple little things. Unfortunately, I got a little spoiled. But overall, I think that I'm going to go in here and be very shocked at this big battle.
You're spoiling all of us with this great bonus content.
Bye, Brian. Bye, everybody. So you'll do the write-up?
Yeah, and what do I have to do for the guide?
Just look at it, and tweak it. I don't know. Do whatever you want.
Is it just the doc you sent me?
Okay, let's go offline. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.